Welcome aboard the night flight. This is Hatman, your captain speaking. I will be delivering you to your destination, safe and sound, and also providing the in-flight entertainment. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with these night flight shows, what the concept is, it's basically an open forum where we talk about whatever you guys want to talk about, obviously within the confines of the YouTube algorithm, which is extremely aggressive. So when talking about certain subjects, we have to use euphemisms and stuff like that. But yeah, it's an open forum. Talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. Doesn't have to be boxing, can be anything, religion, history, politics, television, video games, dating, marriage, life, spirituality, literally anything, music. So that's the concept. Why do I call it the night flight? Well, there was a show way back in the days, either on Kiss or Choice FM in London, hosted by a guy called Commander B. And his show was called The Night Flight, and I always liked the concept when he did it. Sometimes he'd have MCs on, rapping. Occasionally they'd clash each other on his show, have a battle. And during the battle, he'd shout out, "Turbulence, turbulence." So yeah, I always liked the Commander B Night Flight show. Since it's no longer going, as far as I'm aware, I thought I'd adopt that name and use it for my open forum show here on YouTube. So that's the concept. We're now at cruising altitude, so you guys can unbuckle your seat belts, push your seats back, grab a drink from one of the air hostesses, and enjoy. Participate in the discussion if you wish, or just listen and relax. So shout out to Jay Ward in the super chat, in the live chat, Kieran Malcolm, Jay Zone, GMS Nightmare. Where else we got here? Omar, Cool Drems, Eamon, AJ, Free Coffee Guy, June Sports, Johnny Gaffer, Taylor Blair, KO Talk, Nathaniel, Chrissy G, Chris YG or Chrissy G, First Round Boxing, Warts, Joey Real Gamer, JM. Says, "Where's my hot towel, bro? Hey, you ain't in first class. You're only in economy." Shout out to JM. Big up Hyperspaz. So, if you guys want to suggest topics, we can get into anything you want to talk about. But I'm going to start off with the weigh-in for the Usyk-Rico Verhoeven fight, which is taking place tomorrow. Big up Fernie G, which is taking place tomorrow in Egypt. Usyk weighed in at 233 pounds, a career heaviest for him. Rico weighed in, I think, close to 260. Now, I said in a recent video, or maybe it was a recent live stream, that, and I've been saying this maybe for the past year or so, maybe more than that actually, Usyk is in decline. It's just that the majority of the boxing press, boxing media, and boxing fraternity in general haven't seemed to cotton onto it yet. He's in decline. It doesn't mean he's not still the best, because he's so incredible as a fighter. He can decline some and still remain on top. But what I've predicted is that over the next few fights, and it might start with this one, the decline in Usyk is going to become apparent to the general public. Him coming in at a career heaviest 233, I don't know any other way to interpret it than he's not training as hard, or he hasn't trained as hard for this fight as he normally trains. To put it in perspective, this is 10 pounds heavier than he was for the first Fury fight. 7 pounds heavier than he was for the second Fury fight. 6 pounds heavier than he was for the Dubois rematch. In order for Usyk to be at his absolute best, and look, as you get older, you push on into your late 30s and into your 40s, of course, your weight is going to increase some, but 10 pounds of extra weight since the first Fury fight, I don't think that's just age. I think that's the effects of reaching the top of the mountain and now not being as motivated as you were before you reach the summit. How can you be? When you've beaten all the biggest names and you've done it twice, you've made incredible sums of money. I don't care how disciplined you are. I don't care what a professional you are. You're not going to be able to train with the same intensity when you're fighting a kickboxer who has one professional boxing match on his record as you did for your first heavyweight title fight against Anthony Joshua. When was that? 2021? 2020, somewhere around there. You're not going to be able to train with the same intensity now. Even the intensity he had before the Undisputed fight, the first Undisputed fight with Fury. He'd never met Fury in the ring before, so the motivation was extra high. You're not going to be able to train with the same intensity. So at 233, he's obviously not going to be as mobile as he was earlier on in his career. So Free Coffee Guy says maybe it's deliberate. Can't rely on his legs as much, so he's putting on size. Well, no, I don't think it's deliberate at all. In his head, and in the minds of some fans, they might try and spin it to themselves in that way. Oh, he wants to be heavier so he can be stronger and be more of a knockout. No. Usyk's always been about movement. In the Dubois rematch, despite the fact he won it earlier than he did the first fight because Dubois played into his hands by being ultra aggressive, Usyk was doing things in that fight that we're not accustomed to see him doing early on. For example, there were moments in that first Dubois fight which you'd never saw him do these things against Anthony Joshua, particularly in their first fight. He would stand in the corner with his hands up, right, with his gloves up, and wait for Dubois to hit his gloves before moving off. Dubois' a puncher. You don't stand in the corner if you're Usyk and wait for a puncher to get shots off on you. That's so un-Usyk-like. He never did that in the first AJ fight. Certainly not early on when he was fresh. Never. But he was doing that against Dubois because he doesn't have the same energy in his legs, especially at 227 as he was in that rematch, as he did earlier on in his career. That's not Usyk's style, to stand there and take shots on the glove. No, it's not what he does. If he's moving forward, sometimes he'll block shots on the gloves, but he doesn't back up into a corner, put his gloves up, and then wait for a big heavyweight to wail away. He doesn't do that. That's a sign of decline. And I did a film study about it on my Patreon page on the boxing tier, the Boxing Brotherhood. Check it out if you want to sign up for my Patreon for the boxing tier. It must be about an hour long, and I go through several Usyk fights and I show you the before and after. The way he used to fight at heavyweight compared to the way he fights at heavyweight now. And when you see the before and after, when I play footage of, let's say, the first AJ fight and then footage of the Dubois rematch, you'll see a massive difference. It's kind of like gaining weight. You know, when you are gaining weight, and I'm talking about gaining fat, it doesn't happen overnight. It happens gradually. And because it happens gradually, you don't necessarily notice the difference until you look at before and after pictures of yourself, or until you realize that your clothes don't fit you anymore. And it's a similar thing with Usyk's decline, or any fighter's decline. It tends to happen gradually. So, yeah, I am absolutely, I mean, who the hell, seriously, who the hell could possibly be as good if they were an elite fighter all along, as Usyk has been? Who the hell could possibly be as good at 39 years of age as they were at 32 years of age? Like, where does that ever happen? It doesn't happen. It's a rhetorical question. It doesn't happen. The only time that something like that could happen is if somebody wasn't really training hard in their early 30s, or there was some type of deficiency in their game in their early 30s, and somehow they discovered the secret to success in their late 30s, but that is not the case with Usyk. Usyk was a fantastic fighter all the way throughout his career. Always been technically brilliant. Always been in great shape. Always had a good chin, good defense, everything. For a guy like that, there is just no way you're going to be as good at 39 as you were at 32. There's just no way. And he isn't. To me, it's clear he's not. And coming in so heavy, 233 pounds, a career heaviest, 6 pounds heavier than he was for the Dubois rematch. For me, it's an indication of the fact that he's just not as motivated fighting a guy like Verhoeven, or Verhoeven, however you pronounce it, as he is fighting real top heavyweights. How could he be, you know? He's only a human being at the end of the day. Now, somebody asked, how big an upset would this be if Usyk were to lose this fight? For me, it would be the biggest upset of all time. Usyk isn't in his prime. You know, Mike Tyson was in his prime when he lost to Buster Douglas. So that's the biggest upset I'd seen previously. He was in his prime in terms of age, right? He was 24, 23, 24 when he lost to Buster Douglas. Undisputed heavyweight champion. Usyk is certainly not in his prime, but he's still regarded as the best heavyweight in the world. He's still unified heavyweight champion. And unlike Buster Douglas, Rico Verhoeven is coming from a different sport. Buster Douglas was kind of a fringe contender, but he was a seasoned vet by the time he fought Mike Tyson. I think he was 28, 29. Must have had 30 fights or more, somewhere around there. He'd fought for the heavyweight title previously against Tony Tucker. So it weren't his first rodeo. Whereas Rico Verhoeven's had one professional boxing match in his whole life. He's in his mid to late 30s. I think he's 37 or something, 36. If he were to beat Usyk, yeah, for me, that would be the biggest upset of all time. I'm not expecting him to beat Usyk, but I wouldn't at all be surprised if Usyk looks somewhat unimpressive and the public sees signs of decline there. It wouldn't at all surprise me. If it doesn't happen in this fight, it's surely going to happen in the next couple of fights, I reckon. So that's my take on the Usyk situation. AJ says, I blame Jason Statham for this monstrosity. Yeah, apparently, as the story goes, Jason Statham is the one who convinced Turki Al-Sheikh to make this fight because he is a good friend of Rico. So he showed Turki some videos of Rico fighting and said, this is the guy who should be in there with Usyk next. I mean, obviously it's diabolical for boxing fans, but it shows what a fantastic friend Jason Statham is. I mean, what a touch for Rico. Shout out to Long John Silver. Pause. Kieran Malcolm says, what about when a 41-year-old Vladimir Klitschko fought AJ? Vitaly said that was the best he'd ever seen him fight. I do agree with you, by the way. I'm just throwing this example out there. Well, Vladimir Klitschko is an example of what I was saying before. Klitschko was a guy who was deficient when he was in his late 20s, early 30s. He had issues with his style. He had issues with his stamina. He had issues with his confidence. He had issues with his ring craft. Usyk is not in that category. Usyk is a guy whose game has been solid the whole way through his professional career. He wasn't deficient in any way when he was in his 20s or early 30s at all. A guy like that doesn't become better when they're 39 than they were at 32 or 28. It doesn't happen. Do I still play video games? Very occasionally, not often. Trollsabad says, I think Vlad's best was around the time when he fought. Hey, I agree. Favorite fighter? I got several favorite fighters. Mike Tyson, Roy Jones, Corey Sanders. Even though he wasn't a great fighter, he was one of my favorite fighters. What about non-boxing topics? You guys want to get into any of those? It is a night flight after all. It's an open forum. So you might have noticed that I've been posting a lot of nostalgic photos, pictures on my YouTube community tab. There was a leather head bag. You guys remember that? From back in the days, back in the 90s? Those leather head duffel bags were all the rage. There was some guy, I don't know whether he was trolling, who left a comment saying only rich kids could afford those. I don't know what planet he was living on, but I grew up in South London. Definitely not a rich neighborhood. Very rough back then. And there were plenty of kids that had those leather head bags. There was also those Harold Bishop crisps from Spa, which I put a picture up of. Not many people knew about them, but they were elite. The Harold Bishops. I think they came in a multi-pack and the Harold Bishops were one of the flavors. But the Harold Bishop flavor was crazy. And those Harold Bishop Neighbors Spa crisps, the flavoring was sometimes way more concentrated in one of them than in another. When I say crisps, they were like maize balls. Maize snacks, right? So they were in a bowl shape. And some of those bowl-shaped snacks had way more flavoring in them than others. They looked like a really deep orange or deep red. When you ate one of those, you'd damn near be tripping afterwards. The Harold Bishops were crazy. There was also Meanies. I loved Meanies. Meanies for me, I don't know whether they still sell them, but back in the days, in the early 90s, Meanies were better than Space Raiders. You see, Space Raiders have got legendary status now. But I'm just telling you, Meanies were better. I was around at the time. Space Raiders were right there and Meanies were right there. I'm telling you, Meanies were better. The flavor was more intense. They weren't full of so much air. There was more substance to them when you bit into them. And yeah, they were just fantastic crisps. Meanies all the way. And I like Space Raiders, pickled onion. Don't get it twisted, but Meanies were better. There was the 5p bag and a 10p bag. Later on, they got rid of the 5p bag and it was just a 10p and a 20p bag. Have I seen the latest trailer for the Street Fighter movie? I'm not sure if I've seen the latest trailer, but I've seen several trailers and it just looks bizarre to me. I guess they're going for a ridiculous type of movie. They're not trying to be too serious about it. But I don't know, man. That Cody Rhodes guy is Guile. Looks all sorts of wrong. He just, I don't know, man. It just don't work. If you're going to get a guy that has that kind of build to play Guile, you need to make the hair smaller. You know? If the hair's going to be that big, you need a bigger guy. So the casting is very odd. 50 Cent as Balrog. 50 Cent is 50 years old. Balrog is supposed to be a young character in Street Fighter 2. Not a 50-year-old man with a wrinkled face. What's that all about? The only casting that I thought was really on point, I guess the casting for Ryu is pretty good, but the casting for Zangief was bang on. That guy's literally 7 feet tall, and he looks like Zangief. So they did well with the Zangief character. Big up Green Entity for the super chat. It says Evander Holyfield versus David Benavidez at cruiserweight. Who do you reckon? Holyfield all day. Holyfield all day, twice on Sunday. David Benavidez is very good, but he's no Evander Holyfield. Holyfield was a serious puncher at cruiserweight. He was fast. He was incredibly resilient. He went 15 rounds. He was a great combination puncher. Not quite as fast as Benavidez, but still very fast himself. Vicious, great chin. Now, Holyfield all day. Big up Green Entity. What do you think, though? That's just my opinion. We don't have a time machine to send Benavidez back to the time when Holyfield was cruiserweight champion. Yeah, I agree with AJ. 50 Cent looks old and weird as Balrog. I don't know what that's all about. Why did they choose 50 Cent to play Balrog, bro? He's an old man. Now, I haven't seen Mortal Kombat 2. Fernie G says some people are saying it was quite good. Which mainstream rapper do I think can compete or possibly beat a full-time battle rapper in a battle rap ring? In terms of current rappers, I got no idea because I don't follow rap music like that. But there were some rappers back in the days who have competed in battle rap, like Cassidy, and he did very well. But I think he came from a battle rap background anyway. But for most of his career, he was more like a studio rapper, not really a battle rapper. But when he went into battle rap, Cassidy, he tore it up. Cannabis, on the other hand, was a disaster when he turned his hand to battle rap. That was one of the most embarrassing things I've seen. Anyone else see that when Cannabis tried his hand at battle rapping? Shocking stuff. David Haye versus Riddick Bowe. It's a good fight, but I'd say Riddick Bowe. David Haye would have the power to hurt him and maybe knock him out. But Riddick Bowe has the power to hurt and knock out David Haye too. He was very aggressive but with the jab. You just have to watch out for David Haye coming in with a big right hand. But I want to say Riddick Bowe. Okay, Raskas or Can I Boss? I'm going to call him Can I Boss for the sake of the algorithm, even though pause, Can I Boss? Mobb Deep, the infamous, or Smith & Wesson, The Shining. Raskas and Mobb Deep, the infamous. Yeah, literally a disaster because he battled a guy called Disaster and got his butt handed to him. He had those dark shades on and he was grinning with embarrassment the whole way through. And me too, I'm traumatized by that Cannabis line. It's crazy, isn't it? But I'm also traumatized by some of Cameron's lines. What the hell is up with that Cameron guy, bro? Because there was another line where he said something very similar, Cameron. Unbelievable. Bowe versus Vitali, I've actually got Bowe in that fight. I think stylistically, that's a good matchup for Riddick Bowe. If you look at the way that Lennox Lewis fought Vitali Klitschko, he had a couple of rocky rounds early where he was trying to box. After that, he attacked him and he had more success. Riddick Bowe is better at that kind of fighting than Lennox Lewis, at least when he's in there against somebody that isn't a massive puncher. And Vitali Klitschko, although he had a very high knockout ratio, he wasn't a massive one-punch guy. He was an accumulation puncher. And Riddick Bowe was better at that kind of fighting than Lennox Lewis, walking you down behind a jab, mauling you on the inside. That was Riddick Bowe's game, really. That's what he was really good at. And unless you're a serious puncher, Bo's going to chew you up fighting like that. If you're a big guy, Bo's just going to chew you up. So I'll go Riddick Bowe over Vitaly Klitschko. I think that's a good matchup for him. Now, he did get the brakes beat off him by Andrew Golota. But Andrew Golota is a different kind of style to Vitaly. Shorter in height, more of a lateral mover, mixes it up on the inside with combinations. He's not quite as upright. Vitaly Klitschko, stylistically, if we compare him to any of Riddick Bowe's opponents, was most similar to Jorge Luis Gonzalez. I'm not saying Gonzalez was as good as Vitaly Klitschko. He wasn't, but he was a very good amateur, by the way. Jorge Luis Gonzalez, very, very, very good. One of the best amateurs in the world for a long time. But he was extremely arrogant, and that cost him in his professional career. But stylistically, he was very similar to Vitaly Klitschko. If you look at the way he boxed, and obviously, back in those days, when Jorge Luis Gonzalez came up as an amateur in the 80s, the Soviet Union and Cuba were trading a lot of knowledge in many ways, but certainly in boxing. A lot of the Soviet trainers actually coached the Cubans, for those who don't know, which is why there was a lot of stylistic similarity between the Cubans, especially back then, and the Soviet fighters. And so, yeah, Jorge Luis Gonzalez had a very similar style to Vitaly Klitschko. And similar height too, 6'7", tall guy, Gonzalez. And Bowe just chewed him up. Big up James Clifford for the super chat. He says, did you manage to see Project Hail Mary, the recent film? I saw a great movie from the 60s with Lee Marvin called Point Blank, a weird action thriller. So I looked at the trailer for Project Hail Mary and I was instantly put off. I didn't realize it was some kind of comedy, not some kind of goofy sci-fi comedy. I was like, no, this ain't for me. I like my sci-fi, in most cases, to be serious. Not some goofy, I mean, maybe it's a good movie. I'm not saying people are supposed to hate it, but it's just not my kind of movie. The tone of it and everything that I saw in it, I was like, no, this ain't for me. But big up James Clifford for the super chat. Now, some people will say, well, what about Star Wars? Well, I only like the Star Wars prequels because of one character. Literally one character, which was Palpatine. Other than that, I didn't like him at all. Well, actually, I guess Samuel L. Jackson was all right. But mainly, it was all about Palpatine. And with Palpatine, it's really just the third movie where he reveals his true form. You know, where he reaches his final form, and that's the one that's the most wildly entertaining. The previous two were pretty much trash. Shout out to Ingram. Yeah, it's bizarre that people don't understand the meaning of quit. Very, very strange. But it seems to be a uniquely British thing. I'm not sure about that channel that you've mentioned there, or who he is, whether he's British or not, but I haven't seen too many Americans get confused about the meaning of the word quit. It seems to be a large minority of British fans who don't understand what quit means. Very strange. Oh, excuse me, JM. I missed the super chat there. Sorry about that. Let me get right to it. Big up James Clifford. JM says Frot should be pronounced Frock as he's Polish. Is that right? So has Frank Warren been pronouncing it correctly all along? Is that how Polish people pronounce that name? Since it's a Polish name, is it pronounced Frock? Yes, I've seen No Country for Old Men. It's a decent movie, but I've never been blown away by it the way that many other people are. But, you know, it's a decent movie. In Circle says, I think they know what it means. They just think it's negative and doesn't fit the culture of toxic positivity. So, recently, when I've been waking up in the morning doing my shadow boxing routine, I put a fight on, usually a 12 rounder, sometimes a 10 rounder, and I shadow box for 3 minutes, and then when the bell goes, I rest and shadow box, etc. And one of the things that I used to love about American commentary as opposed to British commentary is the fact that the likes of Larry Merchant and Jim Lampley and many other American commentators used to make fun of the fighters. Now, some people say, well, that's terrible. They don't respect the fighters. Look, boxing is, and all spectator sports are, a form of entertainment. We want to be entertained. One of the reasons that I quite enjoyed Snoop Dogg when he was a commentator for Triller was because he was talking trash. When a fight is boring, the last thing I want to hear is Adam Smith on his soapbox spewing out a bunch of virtue signaling. You know? It just makes me sick to my stomach. Boxing is a sport at the end of the day where two people are trying to beat each other's faces in, render each other unconscious. It's a savage sport. So how can a little bit of light-hearted banter at the fighter's expense when a fight's going on be so horrendous when you consider the nature of the actual sport itself? Like, come on. So I do miss the kind of jokes and trolling and whatnot that Larry Merchant and Jim Lampley used to do as commentators on HBO back in the 80s in particular, but also to some extent in the 90s. And American commentators used to do that quite a lot, maybe up until the early 2000s when they started to tone it down a little bit. But I found myself, when I was doing my shadow boxing, laughing out loud at some of the stuff that Larry Merchant was saying. So one of the fights, for example, the other day that I was shadow boxing to was Buster Douglas versus Oliver McCall. And it was a very dull fight. And so Merchant and Lampley were cracking jokes about how dull the fight was. And that helps fans enjoy their evening. If a fight is dull, well, the commentators need to fill that void. Say something funny. Not Darren Barker funny, because that guy's about as funny as a plank of wood. They need edgy characters. And that's something that, for some weird reason, has never existed in British boxing commentary to any great extent. The only commentator that I ever remember in British commentary that used to do that was a guy on Eurosport called Steve Holdsworth. He was hilarious. And he's still probably my favorite UK boxing commentator of all time, Steve Holdsworth, when he was off the leash, because there was a time later on when he started gaining kind of a cult following because of his Eurosport commentary, where he did some more high profile fights, and it was clear they'd reined him in a bit. He wasn't coming out with all the wisecracks and trolling that we were accustomed to on Eurosport. But in his Eurosport heyday, Steve Holdsworth was flipping hilarious. He was the GOAT when it came to UK commentators as far as jokes, banter, trolling, you know, poking fun at the fighters. And you can't say nothing to Steve Holdsworth about doing that because he's a former fighter himself. If you ever see Steve Holdsworth, he's got the classic boxer's flat nose from being punched so many times in the face. So, yeah, Steve Holdsworth for me was the GOAT as far as UK commentators, just for the bants. AJ says it's because Barker and Bean types are scared straight of even coming off as slightly negative to a fighter. That's why. Yeah, but it's really a UK thing, isn't it? Because in America, they don't go overboard, even now, with regards to protecting the fighters' egos. In the UK, these commentators and pundits are just so terrified of hurting a fighter's ego, even in the slightest, which is why these weirdos refuse to use the word quit, even when it's totally appropriate. If a guy quit in a fight, he quit in a fight. He chose not to continue. But he had an injury. Yeah, he had an injury. That doesn't mean he didn't quit. Quitting isn't predicated. The act of quitting is not predicated on whether or not you're injured. It's irrelevant. If you have the ability to continue and you choose not to, injured or otherwise, that is called quitting. The only time a fight is stopped and you can't call it quitting is when the referee jumps in and stops it, or when the corner throws the towel in, or when the fighter is on the canvas and they're so incapacitated by a body punch or a head punch that they're incapable of getting to their feet before the 10 count. Those are instances where it's not quitting. But if a guy is capable of beating a 10 count and he chooses not to, that's called quitting. Maybe I'm repeating myself from what I've said in recent videos, but it just frustrates me that people can't seem to wrap their head around the concept of what quitting actually means. Nissan Warrior says, I don't know though, Americans are so unbelievably biased about US boxing and ignorant about any boxing outside the US. Yes, they are, but that's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is they don't try so hard to protect fighters' egos. American commentators, that is, as British commentators do. American commentators are not, most of them anyway, even now, afraid to use the word quit when a fighter quits. But somehow, UK commentators are allergic to this word. It's very strange. Fernie G says, I'm not sure if it's nostalgia or just me, but when I rewatch old great fights or old great back and forth fights, I find myself getting emotional. I know it's weird, but I've seen Lampley show similar emotions. Is that weird? I don't think it's weird. A lot of people get emotional over nostalgic things because they watch a fight from back in the days and it brings back a load of old emotions and memories that you were experiencing at the time. It's like certain music, certain old songs can make people emotional because it takes them back to a time when certain things were going on in their life, maybe happy times, happier times than today, and they get emotional about it. Yeah, in the UK, and it's a good example actually in Circle, the UK is probably, compared to America, UK commentators are far more likely to focus on the guy that lost but put up a good effort than the guy that actually won. That's a consistent thing with UK commentators. Indeed, that's another great example by Encircled. David Haye had a ruptured Achilles, and he chose to carry on with a ruptured Achilles. The guy could barely stand up. So if David Haye continued until he got knocked out with a ruptured Achilles, then how in the world can you say that Daniel Dubois did not quit in the second Usyk fight, or didn't quit even in the first or in the Joyce fight? Ridiculous. Of course he quit. Maybe it was a wise decision because potentially he could have lost vision in his eye if he continued. Potentially, but there are plenty of guys that have gone the full 12 with a fractured orbital and didn't lose their vision. But there's always the risk there. Maybe it was a wise thing for Daniel Dubois to bow out the way he did. But in doing so, literally speaking, he quit. Big up Adam Fawkes for the super chat. He says, did you see Crawford wrestling Opatai? Yeah, I did. There was a lot of weird fanboy comments. on that video. There were some people saying Oppenheimer could have easily destroyed Terence Crawford if he wanted to. He really wasn't trying. I mean, Terence Crawford has a wrestling background. I don't care if Oppenheimer's 50 pounds, 60 pounds heavier than him. If he doesn't also have a wrestling background, I'm telling you, Crawford's going to twist him up like a pretzel. Even if you're a massive guy, if you try to wrestle with someone that's actually trained in wrestling, you're not going to win. Anyone see the video of that? What's he called? Is it Larry Wheels? Is that a guy's name? Is some enormous bodybuilder. Seems like an absolute goofball. And I'm not sure whether his videos are even real or not. I'm not 100% sure because he just seems like such a goofball. It's like, is this an act? Or is he really this way? But anyway, this enormous Larry Wheels guy, I think he's called Larry, his surname's definitely Wheels. 270 pounds of pure muscle. I'm sure roided up to the eyeballs. And he went to some MMA gym to spar a guy who was like a welterweight in MMA. And he was like, oh, come on, man. This guy's not going to be able to do nothing with me. The size of me, the strength, I'll just be able to pick him up and do whatever I want. And the guys were warning him, nah, Larry, you don't understand. This guy's going to, make you tap quick. And of course, that's exactly what happened. He was literally twice the size of the guy that he got in the octagon with. And the guy made him tap in a matter of seconds. When you're in there with someone that can actually wrestle, come on, bro. It don't matter your size or your boxing skills. You are cooked. We got Matt Borgerson for the super chat. Matt Borgerson in the house. He says, Larry Wheels was criticized for not getting a prenup with his wife, but turns out 90 days later they divorce. He loses his wife anyway. Yeah, and that's the part where I wonder whether the whole Larry Wheels thing is real or it's some kind of like real life acting going on, Because I saw a video, I think it was of Larry Wheels, and this was a couple of months ago, and he was talking to Rampage Jackson, and he said that he gives his wife something like 30 or 50 grand a month. This is when they were still married. 30 or 50 grand a month for her upkeep. I guess buying Birkin bags and doing whatever else she does, wasting money. And I was even Rampage Jackson was like, you give your wife what? How much money? And that Larry Wheels with a straight face was like, yeah, give her like 30 or 50 grand a month. Huh? It almost looked like Rampage wanted to choke him out there and then on general principle for being such an absolute donut, for being such a ridiculous simp. How could you possibly give your wife that amount of money a month to spend it on rubbish or nonsense? Like, are you insane? Is Larry Wheels that stupid, or, like I say, is it some kind of social media acting going on where he's pretending to be this dumb guy that's going around? You know what I mean? I'm not sure what it is. June Sports says Rampage is hilarious. Yeah, he's hilarious and he's also terrifying. Like, Rampage is one guy who you would not want to mess with in any kind of street situation at all. Rampage is a real bad man. Matt Borgerson says, trust me, Hatman, he's very stupid. He lives in America. These people exist. Like, what could you possibly... How could you in your mind possibly come to the conclusion that your wife needs 50 grand a month? Let's just go with the smaller figure, 30 grand a month when you're still married. You're giving your wife 30 grand. Why? What in the world could she possibly need that costs 30 grand a month? Like, unbelievable. It's obscene. Big up Green Entity for the super chat. He says, do you think Dillian Whyte has the power to knock out or at least drop a prime Mike Tyson if you took him back to the 80s? I don't think he would beat him, no. If you stood Mike Tyson upright, blindfolded, and then let Dillian Whyte unleash his hardest left hook, then yeah, he could probably drop him or knock him out. But in the midst of a fight, when Mike Tyson's got good reflexes and he's moving his head, he's quite good at riding the shots when they do land. Even if Dillian Whyte catches him, because Tyson sees the shot coming, he's likely to brace for it and take it. So I'd say in a normal fighting scenario, probably not. Mike Tyson had a fantastic chin. A fantastic chin. His chin was actually underrated because when he did get stopped, it was at least in part due to exhaustion. Yeah, Buster Douglas really hurt him in that 10th round and knocked him out. But Mike Tyson had taken a terrible beating for 9 rounds prior to that. So his punch resistance was already worn down and he was badly fatigued by the time he got knocked out like that. But Mike Tyson had a very underrated chin. So in a normal fighting situation, I'll probably say no. I'm not sure there's any known heavyweight that I can think of that I would bet would drop Mike Tyson with one punch when he's fresh in boxing history, because again, he's good at bracing for the shot. He keeps his chin glued to his chest. He can ride the shots. Do you know what I mean? Be very, very hard to knock him out with one shot like that, unless you really, really wear him down first. But big up Green Entity for the super chat. What do you think, though? It's just my opinion. It's not to be mistaken for any kind of indelible truth. It's just an opinion. What do you think? Joey says, Hatman, Larry Wheels says he's still paying his ex-wife even after the split. If he's really that stupid and it's not some kind of social media act, then he deserves it, doesn't he? Because certain people need to be made an example out of so that other people don't follow them in their stupidity. When I shadow box to a 12 rounder, do I look at the screen or pretend you have your own opponent, or both? Both. I do both. How did Larry Wheels even rise to prominence? Was it just from being a social media guy? Like, what kind of content was he making? How did he become known in the first place? Somebody needs to make a song called Simpin' Ain't Easy. Because you know there's the old song called Pimpin' Ain't Easy. Someone needs to do the remix, Simpin' Ain't Easy. Larry Wheels is finding out now that simping ain't easy. Free Coffee Guy says, just being one of the strongest bodybuilders. Okay. Someone else says powerlifting. Ros B says, but Foreman certainly could have dropped him fresh in one. I'm not sure about that. I mean, George Foreman in his prime was the same weight as Mike Tyson. George Foreman, did he ever fight anyone remotely like? I mean, he fought a guy with a good chin in George Chuvalo. He couldn't put him down. He stopped him. Yeah, the referee stepped in and stopped the fight, but he hit George Chuvalo with massive shots. Didn't go down. Chuvalo had a great chin. He didn't go down. do apologize for the stuttering visuals, some connectivity, but hopefully you guys are not hearing stuttering audio. No, I think that the criticism of Bud Crawford is way over the top. Bud Crawford beat good guys at 135 and 140. Okay, they weren't Hall of Famers, but they were good guys, and in many cases, guys in their primes. He beat Ricky Burns in his prime. He beat Yuri Gamboa in his prime. He beat Victor Postal in his prime. Okay, and Dongo wasn't very good, but he beat him in his prime for whatever it's worth. When he moved up to welterweight, he tried to get that fight with Boots. Boots, for whatever reason, didn't want it or it didn't happen. And so there was just leftover guys at 147. The PBC guys were ducking him. Spence ducked him. When he beat Spence, it wasn't a prime version of Spence, but it was still a good version. It was still a Spence that beat the brakes off Yordenis Ugas and Danny Garcia. So it wasn't a prime Spence, but he was still a good Spence, and he ruined him. So I think the criticism of Crawford is so overboard, it's almost, in fact, it's not almost ridiculous, it is ridiculous. He had a close fight with Madrimov. I thought Madrimov actually nicked the fight, but it was close. Then he beat Canelo, and everyone said, oh, he's a past it, Canelo. Come on, bro. He jumped up how many weight classes to fight Canelo? Like, give it a rest. It's not like Crawford's in his prime either. Aren't Canelo and Crawford the same age? I think Crawford might actually be older. So come on, stop it. But I've seen a lot of that criticism just bashing Crawford. Oh, he's got a terrible rap. I don't know what that's all about. It's very weird to me. Because the vast majority of people before the Canelo fight were picking Canelo to win. But after the fight, oh no, Canelo was past it. Like, come on. If the majority are picking Canelo to win beforehand, you can't be moving the goalposts after the fight when Crawford outboxes him. Stop it. Seriously, stop it. And even if Canelo ain't the same as he was a few years ago, look at the weight disparity. And look at Crawford's own age, Big Up Galaxy Edits for the Super Chat. He says, what do you think about Fury versus Zlatan Ibrahimovic? I don't know what to make of it. Are they going to play football against each other or something? I've got no idea. You guys tell me. I've got no idea what that's all about. They're certainly not going to fight each other. That's for sure. That'd be the weirdest thing ever if they did. Talking about the weirdest thing ever, Don Charles has been having a go at Tony Bellew in a recent podcast with, was it Jug Ears, Spencer Oliver, and that woman from, is it the Daily Mail or the Sun or something? And Don Charles was having a go at Tony Bellew for saying that Dubois quit, which he did quit, claiming that Tony Bellew quit against Adonis Stevenson. I mean, that is literally a psychotic comment. How the hell did Tony Bellew quit against Adonis Stevenson? The referee stopped the fight. Tony Bellew's never quit in his whole career. The referee jumped in and said no more. Tony Bellew didn't get down on one knee and refused to get up before the count of 10. Man, this guy's psychotic. That idiot, Don Charles. In fact, speaking of Don Charles, when I was watching, when I was doing my shadow boxing, I think it was the Lennox Lewis Ray Mercer fight, which I did shadow boxing too. During that fight, yeah, I'm sure it was that fight because the main event, I believe, was Holyfield versus Bobby Ches. And they cut to a shot of Bobby Ches backstage warming up for his Holyfield fight. And he was wearing a Mensa t-shirt. Mensa's this organization for people with really high IQs. And Bobby Ches apparently had a really high IQ. They described it as a near genius level IQ. See, this is why I don't really hold IQ in very high regard when it comes to being an accurate or a holistic measure of intelligence. Because Bobby Ches comes across as an absolute dim-witted idiot. Maybe he's good at mathematics or something, but when it comes to social intelligence, it's very, very low with Bobby Ches, because there are different forms of intelligence. There are some guys, and I've mentioned this before, there are some guys who are very, very book smart, very intelligent with calculation, mathematics, and that kind of technical, abstract thinking. But when it comes to social intelligence, some guys who are very technically book smart intelligent are dummies when it comes to social intelligence. Some of these guys will get fleeced and, ripped off and played all the way through their lives because their social intelligence is so low. So there are different forms of intelligence. And if you're going to be, for example, a business person, you're going to need, in most cases, to have a pretty high level of social intelligence. It's not going to be enough to just be some maths genius and then go into business and think you're going to... No, you're going to need to have a certain amount of social intelligence. You're going to need to be able to read the room, read the markets, read society. It can't all just come down to calculations. You're going to need to have some social intelligence about you. You're going to need to understand people and how to work with people and how to get people to do what you want. That's why so many of these successful entrepreneurs, millionaires and billionaires, many of them don't even have degrees. I think Richard Branson doesn't have any kind of academic background. Correct me if I'm wrong. Bill Gates doesn't have much of an academic background. But then again, he got a leg up from his mum, so probably not the best example. But a lot of these really successful business people and entrepreneurs, they don't really have much of an academic background. They might have some, but they weren't like academic standouts or anything. Ultimately, as I say, social intelligence in business is probably more important than the book smarts. Big up Charles B in the chat. But yeah, Bobby Ches, he always came across as and the reason I brought him up is because Bobby Ches actually had a very similar personality to Don Charles. That's why I brought him up at that particular moment. Very similar kind of personality, overly emotional, illogical, talks nonsense, thinks he's some kind of tough guy. Okay, he was a boxer, but he would just say ridiculous things. Bobby Ches would act like, I remember when Bobby Ches was calling out Frank Bruno and slagging Frank Bruno off and saying Bruno's a coward and this. And he said, if Bruno's got a problem with that, you can see me outside. I'm like, look, I was never a big fan of Frank Bruno, but Frank Bruno would demolish Bobby Ches. Bobby Ches an idiot, bro, I swear. An absolute idiot. And his commentary on the first Holyfield-Tyson fight was so diabolical. It was so ridiculously biased that even Ferdy Pacheco, who was part of the Showtime team, who was obviously, trying to be somewhat pro-Tyson, even he, you could sense at points, was just grimacing at some of the stuff that Bobby Ches was coming out with. I mean, the guy was an absolute weapon. No, Bobby Ches, a former professional boxer, world champion, light heavyweight, cruiserweight, and heavyweight. And his name was spelled C-Z, or for the Americans, C-Z-Y-Z. In British English, CZYZ. That's the way his name is spelt, his surname. Fernie G says, college students nowadays use AI for all school assignments. Absolute joke of a school system. It is a joke of a school system, especially because AI makes loads of mistakes. You know, I'm somebody that has a pretty good knowledge of boxing since I've been watching it from the 80s. And even when I was growing up in the 80s watching boxing, a lot of the boxing I was watching was from the 60s and 70s. So I've got a pretty good knowledge of boxing, and I've typed certain things in to AI to see what answers come up, boxing related stuff. And it's wrong a lot of the time. So for example, the other day I typed in, what is the minimum age for somebody to compete for the British title in boxing? And the Google AI came up with 18, which is completely untrue. The minimum age for someone to compete for the British title is 21. I used a different search engine's AI, I think it was Brave Browser, and that actually came up with the correct answer. It's 21 years of age. But the Google AI came up with 18, so it's not 18. There was some, I'm guessing he's a Zennial or something like that, who was commenting, I forget what the discussion was even about, but he commented on one of my videos a few weeks ago. And he was getting answers from AI and telling me, what, are you trying to say AI's wrong? Wow. When were you born? Yesterday? Yes, AI can be wrong, donut. What are you talking about? I was trying to school this guy. He's like, oh, but AI says different. As if AI can never. He was certain that AI doesn't make mistakes. Dear, oh, dear, oh, dear. Is that what they're teaching kids in school now? Even AI itself will often tell you, the Google AI will often tell you, this doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Words to this effect, double check the sources yourself because this might not be accurate. It even literally gives you some small print underneath telling you that it may not be accurate. What do I think about the things going on in SA? I think it's divide and rule, and I think it's absolutely diabolical. I think the people who are engaged in that activity are the lowest form of life. They say that patriotism is the last refuge of a scoundrel. I would say no, it's xenophobia. It's not that mass immigration doesn't cause problems, and it's not that the indigenous people of any country shouldn't have the right to decide who resides in their country, but the way they're going about it is so diabolical. And their energy is so misplaced. Because if you look at the politics of that country, the previous president, Zuma, do they have presidents in South Africa or is it prime ministers? I forget now. I'm pretty sure it's presidents. But he was involved in a situation where billions of dollars were siphoned out of the public coffers to him and his cronies. Billions. Some of his cronies are, fellow indigenous South Africans. Others are not. Others are Indians and other foreign groups. Those are the people who are actually disenfranchising the indigenous South Africans, but they've got no smoke for them. None. They've only got smoke for the most vulnerable people in their society, who are these immigrants from other African countries, most of them poor. Now, they say they're illegals and this, that, and the other. That's just to get the foot in the door. That's their excuse for doing what they're doing. Oh, we're tackling illegal immigration. There's been loads of videos where they beat people up first and ask questions later. If it was really about tackling illegal immigration, why are they doing that? And the truth has come out in other videos where you see some of these idiot xenophobes, these cosplay Zulu warriors. They're not real warriors. Warriors fight other armed individuals. They don't go after unarmed civilians who are not even fighting back who are totally outnumbered. There's nothing warrior-like about that. So these cosplay Zulu warriors are harassing and haranguing these poor African migrants, picking on the weakest, the lowest hanging fruit, instead of addressing the real corruption in their countries. And in many cases, they're just, even when somebody produces documentation to prove that they have a right to reside in the country, they're still harassing them and finding some other excuse. And there have been several instances which have been shown on social media where they've beaten the living daylights out of somebody, only to find out later on that that person was actually a South African citizen who just didn't speak Zulu, because there are so many different languages in South Africa. They've mistaken indigenous South Africans for foreigners because they didn't answer in Zulu, and beating the crap out of them. If it was about illegal immigrants, then how could you be making mistakes like that? Beating people up and then asking questions later, like, give it a rest. Honestly, they are the scum of the earth. Those xenophobes in South Africa, the absolute scum of the earth for doing all that. Scum of the earth. I never wanted to live in South Africa to begin with, right? For various reasons. Even though by African standards, it's rich and it's got great infrastructure and all that kind of thing, some beautiful cities and locations and whatever, and cheap cost of living compared to the West. But there are so many issues that led me to not want to move to South Africa. And when you put this xenophobia on top, that's just the icing on the cake. No, thank you. Indeed, yes. They've prevented people from going into hospitals. They've gone in, these South African xenophobes have gone into hospitals and have kicked everybody out who wasn't a South African. They didn't go into the hospital and say, how many of you are not South African but have your papers to be here legally? They didn't say that. They just went into the hospital and said, if you're not South African, get out. Well, hang on, I thought it was about illegal immigration. What are you talking about? You're going into the hospital. There was one where there was a Nigerian man trying to get into a hospital with his child, who had his papers in his hand to show he was there legally, and they refused him and his child entry into the hospital. Seriously, these people are the lowest form of life. Terrible. Cockroaches. Honestly, they're cockroaches. And that woman who's heading up the whole thing, I forget her name, a despicable, diabolical black South African woman. She is the devil sent, that woman. Absolutely devil sent. Big up Luca for the super chat. He says, who's the biggest grifter in the heavyweight division, Tyson Fury or DA? Dave Allen or Tyson Fury? Definitely Tyson Fury. And the reason I say Tyson Fury is because Dave Allen is at least going into fights which are bare minimum 50-50, but in most cases, he's a big underdog. So it's not much. I mean, you could call it a grift, but he's taken on people that can beat him. I guess you could say the grift is in convincing people that he has a chance when he doesn't. But are people really that dumb to think that Dave Allen has a chance against Philip Hergovich? Well, if South Africa was different culturally, I'd happily live there. I don't like the culture. That's the problem. I mean, if you look at Cape Town is one of the most beautiful cities on earth. It is. It's a beautiful city. Spectacular looking city. Just incredible. But the society is so corrupt I'm not talking about police corrupt. I'm just talking about general members of the South African public. Their mind and their mentality is so corrupted. It's just not for me. Lucas says, oh, they were, Hatman. Had to get a few people's ear for that one. Okay, socially. Yeah, I mean, socially, I'd have to agree. The devil has many holiday homes around the world. One of them, I think, is in South Africa. I think the devil's got a holiday home there, judging by the way that society's going. Yeah, crime levels in South Africa are unreal, absolutely off the scale. You know, I came across some American guy on social media a few months ago who didn't understand the difference between total homicides and homicide rate. He didn't understand the difference. Bizarre, right? But anyway, he was trying to argue that the United States is more dangerous. I mean, he's one of these weirdos, I guess, wannabe tough guys that's probably not even probably lives in a middle class area of the United States, and he's pretending to be from the hood. But he's one of these guys that kind of takes pride in the fact that the United States has got all these violent cities and they've got this gun culture and what have you. And there were people in the comments and he was commenting on a video about South Africa. And people were trying to educate this idiot that South Africa is actually far more violent than the United States. It is not even close in terms of the amount of violence, homicides in South Africa compared to the US. And South Africa has got a much smaller population. South Africa's population is about 60 million. The homicide rate in South Africa is astronomical. It's so much higher than the US, it will blow your mind. They are not even, like the US is like Disneyland compared to South Africa, I can assure you. And that's one of the reasons I just didn't want to live there. I was like, hell no, I don't need to deal with all that. I do not need to deal with all that nonsense. Hell to the no, no, no. Fernie G says, Hatman, would you rather have an aura of invincibility like Tyson or a funny and witty personality like Ali if you were a pro boxer? Probably an Ali personality. Funny and witty. Yeah. One second, folks. So to put it in perspective, somebody mentioned Mexico there. They said Mexico's really dangerous. South Africa's murder rate is 45 per 100,000 people. So there are 45 homicides in South Africa per 100,000 people. In Mexico, it's 17 homicides per 100,000 people. So it has a much lower homicide rate than South Africa. Less than half the homicide rate of South Africa. That's Mexico. The United States has a homicide rate of 4 per 100,000 residents. So you can see the homicide rate in the United States isn't even in the same universe as a South Africa homicide. It's not even close. Neither is Mexico, which is much higher than the United States' homicide rate, but still nowhere close to South Africa. Not even, again, in the same universe. Less than half. I don't know why so many Americans have this impression that America is like the biggest, baddest, most dangerous country in the world. It's not even close. Oh yeah, Mexico's still crazy compared to Western countries. Very crazy. very, very crazy. But it's still not on the same level as South Africa. South Africa is just totally off the scale. Sports Fan says, I'm reading St. Kitts is 65 per 100K. It is, but that's a bit misleading because the population of St. Kitts is absolutely tiny. So for example, if you live in a country which has a population of 100,000 and 1 year you get, I don't know, 10 homicides or something, maybe lovers quarrels or whatever, you're going to have the impression that the country is extremely dangerous. But in reality, it was just a bit of an anomaly because the population is so, I mean, it could give you a more extreme example. Let's say there was a deserted island, you put 20 people on there, a couple of them got into a fight, and you ended up with 4 dead people. All of a sudden, it's got an enormous homicide rate, and it doesn't really paint an accurate picture of what went on. See what I'm saying? So when it comes to the smaller Caribbean islands, their homicide rates can be a bit misleading when they've only got, a few tens of thousands or 100,000s of people. Can be a little misleading sometimes. Yeah, that's crazy. And Circle says the worst in South Africa is 78 per 100K. That's a madness. Is that like Pretoria or one of those cities or towns in the Joburg kind of region or just north of Joburg? So I don't need any of them kind of problems that South Africa presents. The bad far outweighs the good in that country for me. Much better to move north a bit from South Africa into other countries in Southern Africa, which are way safer, way more peaceful. You don't get all that ridiculous carry on. Maximus says, did you see that dude on Fox News allegedly wearing a face mask? Yeah, I saw that video actually earlier on today. It's very weird. Very weird. Some people are saying it's just a shadow. If it is a shadow, it's the weirdest looking shadow I've ever seen in my life. There have been some other posts which show this guy in photos, and his neck is clearly a little saggy. But can it account for that video? I don't know, man. I don't know what to make of it. Have I heard of Orania? No, I haven't. What's that? Or who's that? But yeah, that video of the Fox News guy was strange. Oh yeah, the Middle East is very safe. Like the rich Gulf states are extremely safe. Chrissy G says, who you got in the Richard Torres Frank Sanchez fight tomorrow? I got Richard Torres. I don't like Frank Sanchez's form. I don't like the way his knees have been looking for years now. I don't like how few punches he throws. Even prior to the loss against Caballero, he fought that Pacific Islander, that Samoan guy. Is he Samoan? What was the guy called that Frank Sanchez stopped on a Saudi card before he fought Caballero? Forget the guy's name. Can you guys remind me of his name? The Samoan guy Frank Sanchez fought prior to, Samoan or Maori or some kind of Pacific Islander that he fought prior to facing Caballero. Nobody? I'll have to look it up on BoxRec. Junior Farr. I've remembered. Junior Farr. So Frank Sanchez in that Junior Farr fight, up until the knockout, he didn't look good. He looked poor in that fight. He was throwing nothing. And I just don't think you can get away with throwing nothing like that. Somebody says he's Tongan. Okay, there you go. Tongan Junior Farr. I don't think you can get away with throwing nothing like that against a dynamo like Richard Torres. Now, somebody might say, well, Torres' activity will work against him, against Sanchez, who is a natural counterpuncher. Torres is going to give Sanchez loads to counter. I think Torres is a bit more skilled than he looks because his style is a bit ragged. But in the Vianello fight, he was able to take Vianello's right hand away completely with his head movement and with stepping off to his right side when he was launching his attacks. He was coming in at an angle rather than just coming straight in. He'd get an angle first and then jump into pocket to avoid the right hand. And he did that in the opposite direction in the Jalalov rematch in the Olympics. So although Torres can look kind of scrappy and disorganized, there is a method to the madness. He's a bit more skilled than he looks. And look, if Frank Sanchez catches him with some big shots, I'm sure he can knock him out because I do think that Richard Torres is chinny. But I'm going to go with the activity, the work rate, the energy, and the youth of Torres over the power and the explosive punching of Sanchez. I just don't like how inactive Sanchez is in the ring. Doesn't throw enough. Walks around posing too much and not doing anything. Encircled says, Frank Sanchez has the knees of a man who died 30 years ago. Yeah, Sanchez's knees are diabolical. Encircled says that's the Cuban style. Well, I'm not sure about that. The Cuban style is technical, yes, but being that low volume, Ortiz was never that low volume. Even a guy like Odlanier Solis, who ate himself out of his prime years as a pro, he was never that low volume, and he was fat as a pig. I'm not sure that Sanchez is that well suited to Eddie Reynoso as a trainer, because Eddie Reynoso, having worked with Canelo for all those years, is a low volume trainer. He likes his fighters to concentrate on quality over quantity. But I'm not sure that really works for Sanchez. My opinion on Calzaghe. Calzaghe was a great fighter. I actually heard a caller recently into TalkSport who was trying to argue that Calzaghe was better than Roy Jones because he beat him. And then he was talking about Roy Jones's age wasn't too different from Calzaghe's when they fought and this, that, and the other. Fighters don't age at the same rate. Roy Jones was completely washed up when Calzaghe beat him. That was nothing even remotely close to a prime Roy Jones. Calzaghe, although he was up there in age himself, was far closer to his prime when he fought Jones than Jones was to his own. It was kind of like Lennox Lewis, Mike Tyson, although Lewis was actually older than Tyson. Lewis was way closer to his prime than Mike Tyson. Tyson was completely washed, totally finished. And it was a similar thing when Calzaghe fought Roy Jones. So the notion that you can say Calzaghe's better than a prime Jones based on that fight, to me, is just absurd. However, where I do back Calzaghe was the win he had over Bernard Hopkins, because Hopkins went on to achieve great things after that. I'm not saying it was necessarily a prime Hopkins, but it was still a very good Hopkins that Calzaghe beat. Very good. Because look at what he went on to achieve after that. So I think that Calzaghe doesn't get enough credit, actually, for the Hopkins win. And he beat a prime Mikhail Kessler, way better than Carl Froch ever did. People kind of deride his victory over Jeff Lacey, but I think that's a bit unfair. Okay, Lacey never proved himself to be a great, but there was nothing prior to the Calzaghe fight to indicate that Jeff Lacey was some kind of hype job. Jeff Lacey was doing what he was supposed to do and doing it impressively. Wasn't he a unified champion going into the Calzaghe fight? Calzaghe ruined him. For all we know, Lacey might have gone on. Had he not fought Calzaghe, he could have gone on to get some other high-level wins. But Calzaghe literally destroyed his brain. Lacey was never the same. His coordination was off. He had no punch resistance. He was completely destroyed by Calzaghe that night. His career was finished, effectively, because of the beating that he received. That can happen. If you take too many blows to the head and you're dehydrated and there's a convergence of a bunch of different factors, you can get ruined in one night and never be the same again. And that is definitely what happened to Jeff Lacey. He was fresh as a daisy before that. After the Calzaghe fight, it's like he aged about 20 years overnight. So Calzaghe was a very good fighter. People criticize him because he used to pull out of a lot of fights and maybe didn't have the confidence to go over to America earlier on in his career. So there are some valid critiques that you can make, but overall, I think he was a very, very good fighter. And when he finally came into his own in the back end of his career, he was a serious force. Do I watch anime? No, I don't. Oh yeah, Odlanier Solis, he ate his way out of his prime. Like so many Cubans, They all think they're Tony Montana when they land in Miami. Actually, with Odair Solis, I think he turned pro in Germany or Ireland or something like that. Somewhere in Europe. But after a while, he ended up in the United States, like so many Cubans do, in Florida, in Miami. You know, with the hamburger meat, you know, the open Hawaiian shirt, hamburger meat, chest, and medallions and all that kind of stuff, flossing. These Cubans all arrive in Miami and they think they're Scarface. They think they're Tony Montana, living it up, because they come from bone-grinding poverty in Cuba, you know? So when they reach America, there's just so much freedom. There's so many sights and sounds and new stuff, and they lose their mind, a lot of these Cubans. That's just what happens. They meet up with people, other people from Cuba who maybe left at the same time as they did or generations before, and they start reminiscing about the old times, and they get to drinking the rum and eating their food and womanizing and doing all the stuff they do. And because they're professional boxers, they got money in their pocket. They're not even that rich, but compared to what they were like in Cuba, they're filthy rich. So they just lose their minds, you know? They lose their minds. Will I watch the Nolan Odyssey film? Yeah, probably. I watch most Nolan films. I wasn't compelled to watch Oppenheimer for some reason. I was just like, not really that interested. But yeah, I probably will watch the Odyssey film. Omar says, Hatman, is it weird that I marinate my steak with ketchup? No. If it works, it works. The other day, what did I see on Instagram somewhere? They were saying you should marinate your steak with, God, I can't remember what it was. It was something odd. Wish I could remember what it was, but I thought, you know what, I might try that. In Circle says, Cuban sandwiches are really good. Well, too good for some of these Cuban heavyweights, right? They eat far too many of them. Joshua Hooker says they move to Miami and don't bother learning English. I can't hold that against them. Because here I am as a monolingual English speaker. Can I speak any other languages in the countries that I've lived in? No. So I'd be a hypocrite to criticize him. Do you know what I mean? I was in Costa Rica for a couple years. I don't know damn near any Spanish. Because when you move to a country, Costa Rica being one example, and you live in a gringo community among other people from the West, Europe and America, you don't really have any need to learn Spanish. You know what I mean? And it's the same with Cubans who move to Florida, places like Miami. Spanish is so widely spoken, that's why they don't end up learning English. GMS Nightmare says, how impressive is it that Atama is right-handed? Not particularly impressive. There's been loads of inverted southpaws over the years. Or inverted orthodox fighters, over the years. Guys that are naturally right-handed that fight southpaw. That's quite a common thing. Michael Mora was a right-handed southpaw, for example. I want to say Victor Ortiz is a right-handed southpaw as well. There's quite a lot of right-handed southpaws. Manny Pacquiao, that's the craziest one. Manny Pacquiao is a right-handed southpaw. Did you guys know this? Massive straight left hand. You would have sworn blind that he's naturally left-handed. No, Manny Pacquiao was right-handed. Crazy, right? Is Costa Rica high altitude? Some of it is. There's parts of Costa Rica that are high altitude. Someone says Hagler was also right-handed, but Hagler was a switch hitter. So he would fight out of both stances. He would switch back and forth. And Circle says Holmes was a left-handed orthodox. Is that right? I didn't realize that. Oscar de la Hoya is also a left-handed orthodox. Yeah, an inverted southpaw. Or an inverted orthodox. I don't know how you want to describe it. Inverted southpaw, inverted orthodox. He was a left-handed orthodox fighter, Oscar de la Hoya. Naturally left-handed, but fights out of an orthodox stance. Andrew Grimbass says, bro, why are they saying Verhoeven is undefeated when he's not? Maybe they mean undefeated in boxing. He's 1-0. He's 1-0 in boxing. Maybe that's what they're talking about. Omar says, are people born with power or is it developed? Both. People are born with power and they develop it. There's no way that Mike Tyson would have punched as hard as he did if he hadn't been taught the technique that he was taught. He had a certain amount of power naturally, yes. But then he was taught how to increase the power even more. So it's both. Rainema says Andre Ward is a left-handed orthodox. Yeah, it's quite common. It's more common than people realize for there to be fighters who fight in an inverted stance relative to their naturally dominant hand. AJ says, I'm undefeated too, just like Rico. I have one less pro fight. There you go. In Circle says, I'm 0-0. They just keep ducking. One second, folks. Just need to refresh the tab here. Why is this tab not refreshing? Come on. My connection can't be that bad. What's going on? Bear with me, ladies and gents. There we go. We're back. And Circle says Usyk is a career heaviest 233. Hope that's not an omen. Yeah, I spoke about that at the top of the stream. A career heaviest for him. I don't know about an omen, but I said a few weeks ago that Usyk is on the decline. I've been saying it for a long time now, over a year probably. Usyk is in the decline. It's just that the wider public haven't cottoned onto it yet. But I am predicting that in his next, let's say 2 fights, the decline that he's experiencing is going to become more apparent to people. And it might even start in this fight. I'm not expecting him to lose at all, but I think people are going to see the decline. Yeah, of course it's natural with age, but it's also natural with a fighter that's achieved everything. When you combine those 2 factors, it's like, how can he possibly not decline? Do you know what I mean? The age and the fact that he's done everything, how can he possibly get up for a 1-0 former kickboxer to the same extent that he got up for Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, Daniel Dubois? Do you know what I mean? And for me, the signs of decline were there even in the Dubois rematch, despite the fact he beat Dubois earlier than he did in the first fight. I agree that Usyk should have retired after Dubois 2. In fact, I think he should have retired after Fury 2, to be quite honest. I think that would have been the best time to get out. At this point, he's past the point of diminishing returns. Big up Charles B. He says, who's your top movie villain of all time? Palpatine is a given. So you're saying Palpatine aside, right? Because Palpatine's the number one. Top movie villain. Give me some suggestions, folks, of movie villains. They're not coming to me immediately. Because Palpatine's such an amazing villain. Who else is a great movie villain? Shout out to Gaz. He says, a Jagba versus Hrgovic would be a tear-up. We need it. Yeah, that's a great fight. Two tall guys, 6'6". One of them with an iron chin. The other one with more one-punch power. That's a really great fight. We do need it. Big up, guys. That's a great matchup. But movie villains. Is anyone even close to Palpatine's level? The Joker in The Dark Knight is definitely there. Thank you, Gaz. Yes. The Joker in The Dark Knight might be, unless someone can come up with another suggestion, the best other than Palpatine. Charles B says Gollum. Is Gollum really a villain, though? He's kind of like a tragic character who's kind of villainous, but not a full-on villain. I don't know how to describe Gollum. He's kind of in his own category. Someone says Hannibal Lecter. Okay, yeah, Lecter's a good villain. Jaws and James Bond. Commodus and Gladiator's good. Shout out to Yuzi. Yeah, Commodus is a good villain. Commodus is a good villain because of how cowardly he is. Like the cowardly and perverse nature of Commodus is why he's so memorable. For me, that's still Joaquin Phoenix's best ever performance, was as Commodus in Gladiator. He was just such a wretched and horrible but memorable villain. Trying to smash his own sister. Trying to blackmail his own sister into sleeping with him. What a diabolical individual. And then when he stabs Maximus before the battle. The level of cowardice is crazy. So Commodus is actually up there for me in terms of the most memorable villains. He's got to be up there. Charles B's mentioning Hannibal Lecter. Hannibal Lecter's a great villain, an iconic villain. I'm actually going to put Commodus above. I was more entertained by Commodus than Hannibal Lecter. Commodus. In fact, Hannibal Lecter for me was better in Red Dragon. You know the start of Red Dragon where who's the actor that's got who's in Hannibal Lecter's office? Is it Ed Norton? Ed Norton, right? Am I misremembering? And Ed Norton figures out that Hannibal Lecter's the guy that he's looking for, even though Lecter's actually helping him on the case, but slyly leading him off the path, away from the scent. And then Lecter comes back into the office and he stabs him and he says to him, "You're a good boy, Will. I think I'll eat your heart." What a diabolical thing to say. Yo, Lecter was crazy. Okay, so it was Ed Norton, yeah. Lecter was crazy. Voldemort, you know, Voldemort's decent. Yeah, Thanos. Quite like Thanos. But Palpatine's way up there. For me, he's like the best. Commodus is up there too. Charles B says Rose in Titanic. I mean, some of the best villains have not been in movies. In wrestling, you've had so many great villains or heels. And the greatest wrestling heel of all time, without any shadow of a doubt, is Vince McMahon. Another great villain, not in a humorous way, but just in a great way, would be Kaiser Soze in The Usual Suspects. That's a great movie villain. One of the great movie twists. Kaiser Soze. Shout out to Sazad. I agree with that. Yeah, Bill the Butcher's a great villain. 100%. But the problem, well, it's not even a problem. Yeah, Bill the Butcher's just a great villain. He's a great villain. A very different kind of, he's a serious villain. A charismatic, serious villain. Whereas some of the other villains like Palpatine, Commodus, there's something comical about them. Which just raises my level of enjoyment when I watch them, because there's something funny about how dastardly they are. Whereas Bill the Butcher was just a villain, and a very good one. Now, I don't think Fury fights Ruiz next at all. Biff Tannen was he was a great villain. He was a great villain in the Back to the Future movies. Bully. Someone says Gus Fring in Breaking Bad. Skeletor. Yeah, the Masters of the Universe movie is coming out this year, innit? I might actually watch that. On some soccer-ish. Pause. I might actually watch that. I hope it's not completely terrible. And Circle says, Palpatine just loved being evil. Palpatine. You know, Palpatine is so close to the people that actually run society in reality. Even though he hams it up. What, you think the politicians that run our world don't ham it up in front of the cameras? Of course they do. They ham it up, they gaslight, just like Palpatine. It's just that since Star Wars is fictional, we can afford to laugh at it then. When real politicians are doing the same thing, it's so diabolical in real life, we're not even laughing. What do I think about Homelander? I'm not familiar. Someone says Michael Corleone. Well, Michael Corleone's not really a villain, though, is he? He's not presented as a villain in the Godfather movies. I guess you could describe him as an anti-hero or something. He's not really presented as a villain. Anton in No Country for Old Men. Yeah, a lot of people like him. Indeed it was, Bexy. Indeed it was. Alonzo, yup, in Training Day. Denzel Washington's villainous character was fantastic. That's definitely a good shout. Alonzo in Training Day was great. Bricktop was a good villain, yep. When it comes to UK movie villains, he's definitely up there. Right, along with Voldemort and a few others. UK movie villains, yeah, he's up there. Charles B says, Saruman did a good job in Lord of the Rings. I agree with that. How many of you have seen the animated Lord of the Rings that came out in, was it the 70s? It was like cel-shaded animation combined with another form of animation. Directed by somebody with the surname Bakshi. I forget his first name. Is it Ralph Bakshi or something? I remember watching that when I was a kid, and it was the most bizarre, psychedelic, animated movie I'd ever seen. And if you watch it now, I think the full thing's on YouTube. It's every bit as bizarre and psychedelic as I remember it. Very, very strange. Particularly Saruman in in that animated Lord of the Rings, bro. Totally bizarre. I think his name was Ralph Bakshi, yeah. Saruman in that is bizarre. He looks like some kind of demonic Father Christmas. And Samwise Gamgee is also very strange in that animated Lord of the Rings, as is Gollum. Gollum is like as camp as anything. In fact, Gollum and Samwise in that animated Lord of the Rings are both unbelievably camp. Literally Julian Clary levels of camp with both of those characters. I don't know whether that's what they were going for some strange reason, but the Gollum character and the Samwise are both unbelievably, like, jump out of the screen level zesty campness. Yeah, John Hurt was in it. Who did John Hurt play? He played Strider, didn't he? Yeah, I swear John Hurt played Strider in that Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings. Yeah, and they made him look Native American too. I remember that. Yeah, he looked Native American. And he was played by John Hurt. And he was wearing a skirt or something. And then, who's the other guy now? The one who tries to take the ring. What's that character's name? Played by Sean Bean in the Peter Jackson movies. What's that character's name? I've forgotten. Boromir. Boromir in the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings had a helmet on with horns, like a Viking. Maybe that's accurate to the book. I don't know. But to me, it was just so random. Man's got this like Viking hat on with horns, and that's Boromir. In Circle says Aragorn was John Hurt. Yeah, Strider. That's the other name for Aragorn, isn't it? Strider. That's what he's known at when he's hiding away as a ranger. Calls himself Strider. Big up Hannibal Beats. He's saying Leonardo DiCaprio in Django. Paolo the Geek says, Gimli in animated Lord of the Rings isn't even a dwarf. I'd have to go back and watch. I've forgotten that bit. I mainly remember Saruman, or Saruman, however you want to pronounce his name. Gandalf, Samwise, and Gollum, Smeagol. And also Strider and Boromir. Do I think Michael Jackson was zesty? I'll just use that word. Yes, I do. Oh, excuse me, Supersized Fries. I missed his super chat. Apologies. It might have come in when I was refreshing my my YouTube tab here. He says, oh no, it didn't actually. I just missed it. He says, I need you to challenge the dark side of the Force and say, do it. Another fan of Palpatine. Do it. I like the part where he says, I love democracy. I love the Republic. Where he's laying it on thick in front of the Senate. I love democracy. It's so crazy. But that's what real life politicians are like. I love democracy. They get all sentimental and ham it up for the cameras. Fake tears and fake I love the Republic. And then later on he's like, I am the Senate. It's treason then. Do it. The actor must have had a blast playing that character, bro. he must have had a blast playing that character. Jar Jar Binks, what an annoying, awful movie character. You know, that's one of the things that made the first two Star Wars prequels virtually unwatchable. Is that horrible Jar Jar Binks character. Terrible, bro. Terrible. Yeah, do it. That was a terrible character. I quite liked that little flying ugly parrot troll thing that sold Anakin, that owned Anakin. He was quite a good character. You got Kira Malcolm. Yeah, let's run up the likes. Run up the likes. How many likes we got? 55, 163 concurrent viewers. Let's get 80 likes. Let's do that. Shout out to everybody locked in. Hannibal says, the lady on Misery scared the hell out of me when I was a kid. Yeah. I remember watching that movie. I was always disturbed by that scene where she takes the brick and then smashes his foot with a hammer. Was it with a hammer? Against the brick to break his foot so he can't leave? Yeah, she was bat-ish crazy. two of the craziest female characters from that kind of period of cinema, you're talking about late 80s, early 90s, would have been the character in Misery, that woman, and then the character in the Michael Douglas movie, Fatal Attraction, the bunny boiler. That's where the term bunny boiler came from. So they were two iconic, crazy female movie villains back in the days. Who's the actress that played the bunny boiler in Fatal Attraction? Someone says John Goodman plays good villains too. I like when he plays good guys though. So for example, I like John Goodman in The Big Lebowski. I like John Goodman in the Denzel Washington movie Flight. Any of you guys seen Flight? Flight is a good film. And I like John Goodman's character in Flight. It's very similar to the character he plays in The Big Lebowski, to be fair. Oh, Glenn Close. Okay, she's the one who played the bunny boiler in Fatal Attraction. Omar says, I haven't watched movies in ages. I only work, go to the gym, sleep, and repeat. Big up Atavistic Intellect in the chat. Someone's mentioning Travis Bickle. You talking to me? You talking to me? Nobody else here. You must be talking to me. Yeah, this isn't Vietnam, Donnie. This is bowling. There are rules. And then you got that guy in The Big Lebowski, played by that Italian-American actor. And he's called Jesus, but he insists that everyone calls him Jesus. It's Jeff Bridges that stars in The Big Lebowski, right? He's the actual guy, The Big Lebowski. Or the dude. Tony S. says, John Goodman as Fred Flintstone. It was good casting. Don't know what therapy we're thinking having Rosie O'Donnell as Betty. Yeah, I agree, Hannibal Beats. The way movies looked back in the days was better. I agree. They look more realistic and therefore more immersive. Movies today and directors today are too concerned with looking stylish. There's something to be said for the simplicity and the realism of the way movies used to be shot. There you go, Telstar. Coming out with the one-liners. I'm a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude. Yeah, Debo was a good villain when it comes to hood movies. Yeah, Debo was like the archetypal hood bully. He was a good villain. Did I like the movie K-Pax? Yeah, K-Pax was decent. Can't say it's up there with my favorite ever movies, but it was decent. It leaves you wondering all the way through the film, is this guy an alien or is he just mentally ill? Have I watched the new Mortal Kombat? I haven't, but I might watch it. Was Christian Bale a villain in American Psycho? As a matter of fact, do you have an opinion on what that movie was about? The movie was about the mind of a psychopath, the mind of a corporate psychopath, the chaotic nature of the mind of a corporate psychopath. Because most people think of psychopaths as like serial killers, but no, the majority of psychopaths are not serial killers. They're not even violent, most of them. But the inner chaos is masked by this veneer of civility. And that's why you have series, for example, like Squid Game. Squid Game, in my opinion, is an insight into real stuff that actually goes on. If you think about Squid Game, it's like Epstein Island territory, isn't it? And if you think that Steen Island is the only place in the world where weird stuff goes on, you're sorely mistaken. There are psychopathic billionaires who maybe haven't unalived anybody, but they've always fantasized about doing it. And when they have a link up, some deranged, depraved individual that owns an island somewhere, they're like, yep, I'll have a bit of that. So that's what American Psycho was about. It was about the mind of a corporate psychopath, having all these fantasies of unaliving people and all this type of business. Yeah, I've seen Departed. Saw that many, many years ago when it came out. It's a remake of, is it a Korean movie called Internal Affairs? I wasn't really a big fan of Departed, to be honest. The Beast in Kung Fu Hustle, that's an honorable mention. He was a pretty funny villain. Well, I'd have to go back and watch the movie again. But yeah, that's the impression I got by the end of American Psycho, that it was all a fantasy in his head. Or at least most of it. What do I think caused UK heavyweight boxing to explode in the early 2010s like it did? This is going to sound weird, but Audley Harrison. Audley Harrison winning Olympic gold caused basically the UK government, I think it was lottery funded, right? But basically a massive cash injection into British amateur boxing because of that Audley Harrison gold medal. To give him his flowers. I'm just being real. And that inspired so many big guys, because Audley did it, and people of all weight classes, to be fair, to get into boxing. Big up Eamon. So after Audley, you of course had David Haye. cruiserweight champion than heavyweight champion. He benefited from what Audley did. Paolo the Geek says, Audley is a hero of British boxing. I mean, you know, Audley is a very... How can I describe Audley Harrison as a character? Audley Harrison is like a wannabe narcissist. He's not actually a narcissist, but he wants to be one very badly. That's the best way I would describe him. And he's read so many self-help books and all this kind of stuff to try and turn himself into a narcissist. But he's just not really about that life. And so because he's got this bizarre thing of this desire to be narcissistic, he comes across as a bit off a lot of the time. He's like a good guy trying to be bad, you know? Trying to be this cutthroat, ruthless. It's just not really him. David Haye was basically what Audley Harrison always wanted to be in terms of personality. David Haye was the real deal. He was really that full of himself. He didn't need to read self-help books written by Les Brown or anything like that to really be confident and full of himself. He was just that way naturally. David Haye was the real deal. David Haye, in terms of his personality, is what Audley always tried to be and wanted to be, but never was naturally. AJ says, tried to watch a Harrison interview or podcast the other day. Couldn't make it past 5 minutes. Complete rambling nonsense. Well, Audley was actually diagnosed with CTE. That's why he ended up losing his license. Is Don Charles a confident guy? Yeah, he's pretty confident. He's got that kind of confidence that comes from ignorance. What Will Be says David Haye was a fraud. After all that talk, he did nothing versus Vlad. Was a joke, oh my toe. Was David Haye a fraud? He was a very good cruiserweight. He was a pretty good heavyweight. I wouldn't describe him as a fraud. He wasn't as good as a heavyweight, obviously, as he made himself out to be. That's for sure. So if you want to describe him as a fraud in that way, okay. But I was talking about David Haye's personality, his innate confidence and whatnot, his narcissism. And I'm not saying that in a pejorative way, I'm just being descriptive. David Haye is somewhat narcissistic. And David Haye basically achieved what Audley wanted to achieve as a pro. Audley laid a particular blueprint out there in terms of independence as a fighter, brash trash talking and all this kind of business, but he never managed to actually reach the pinnacle of the sport, whereas David Haye did. And of course they were old buddies. They used to spar together and hang out and whatnot. And David Haye just had a higher level of belief than Audley Harrison ultimately. He was a more naturally confident character. Audley was a guy that was prone to freezing on the big moment, as he did when he fought Haye. He just totally froze. So I would say Mike Tyson's best win on paper is Larry Holmes. But when you consider the fact that Holmes was 38, he was coming off a 2-year layoff. He only had about a month to train. It's not really that impressive. So in the ring, I would say his best win was probably Tony Tucker. Mike Tyson didn't have that many great wins in the ring. Because the heavyweights weren't that amazing that were around during his prime. They were okay, but it was nobody that would ever go down or anywhere close to being an all-time great other than Larry Holmes. Okay, Michael Spinks at light heavyweight, but not a heavyweight. So I would say Tony Tucker was probably the best heavyweight he beat at the time he beat him. Tony Tucker was a decent fighter, but nothing special. The other guys, Bone Crusher Smith was not very good. Pinklon Thomas, he had some ability, but he was a skag addict. Tyrell Biggs was crackhead. Literally. I'm not being figurative. Literally, he was a crackhead. Tony Tubbs was a decent fighter, but again, nothing amazing. Carter Truth Willie. A lot of these guys were Larry Holmes leftovers. So, Frank Bruno was a decent heavyweight. This is what tends to happen, or this is what tends to be the case when you have a monolithic champion, is they are around in a relatively weak era. Right now, Usyk is kind of seen as monolithic, but he hasn't fought that many world title fights, has he? He hasn't fought that many opponents in world title fights. Who's he fought? Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Daniel Dubois in world title fights. That's it. 3 guys. Rico Verhoeven's going to be the 4th guy in a world title fight. So while he might seem monolithic, he hasn't fought that many different opponents. And the point I want to make is this is a pretty strong era in heavyweight boxing. It's not a weak era. It's pretty strong. This is not like the Klitschko era. That was really weak. And this is not like the Tyson era. It wasn't as weak as the Klitschko era, but it was still relatively weak. This is a much stronger era than that. And Usyk reigns supreme, but yeah, generally when it comes to these monolithic champions that reign for years and years and years, unbeaten, go on these long unbeaten runs for years, it's usually because the division is weak. Because it's very hard to do in heavyweight boxing, to reign for 10 years without losing. If you're in a strong division, it's very hard to do that, regardless of how good you are, because these big guys just hit so hard and they're so physically strong. Someone's going to get you eventually. Maybe you get them back in a rematch, but someone's going to get you. Heavyweight boxing Peter Fury often says this, but heavyweight boxing is almost like a completely different sport to boxing in other weight classes. The Realist says Biggie or Tupac. I wasn't a fan of either of them, to be honest, but if I had to choose, I'd go Biggie, but I was not a fan of either guy. Yeah, I don't really buy this thing that Hay just went in there to survive against Vlad. Because the way that Hay fought at heavyweight is exactly the way he fought in the Klitschko fight. Hay was never a super aggressive heavyweight. He was always a guy that would stay on the outside, would not try to engage in a jabbing contest. He would try to lure you in to fall off balance, and then he'd hit you with a right hand. He was very, very basic, actually, in terms of his approach. He wasn't a very technical heavyweight at all, David Hay. It was just all about athleticism, getting you to overcommit and then catching you with a right. He was pretty much a one-trick pony. Didn't jab much, didn't throw many left hooks. It was very basic stuff, but because he did it with flair, it made it look far more complicated than it actually was. That was his whole game at heavyweight. He came up against Klitschko, who was a much better technical fighter than he was, and also bigger and stronger. And so what he normally did simply didn't work. Klitschko was able to neutralize what David Haye normally did. He was on top of him with a jab. His foot speed and his reflexes were quick enough that anytime David Haye wanted to launch a right hand, Klitschko just took a step back. The right hand missed by miles. So Haye was doing what he normally does. It's just that he was in with someone who was too good for that to work. And I've said so many times, you can't expect a guy who's been fighting one way his whole career to all of a sudden, in the biggest fight of his life, completely flip the script and fight in a different way. I mean, some guys do it, but it's very rare. Most top guys, when they've been fighting a particular way their whole career and they come up against someone that can neutralize them, they can't switch it up and do something different. They're just stuck like that. And that's what David Haye was in the Klitschko. He was just stuck. He's been fighting that way for years and years and years. It didn't work against Klitschko. There was no other way to approach it. He didn't have any other style that he could switch up into to change the fight. You know, that's an interesting thing that somebody said there. It's so hot in Egypt that Eddie Hearn's hair dye is running down his face. Is it hot in Cairo right now? Might that affect the performance of the fighters? Now, it's in a desert region. In some desert regions, it's very cool at night. I don't know if that's the case in Cairo. It's May, certainly in the Middle East, right? In the Gulf. At this time of year, in places like the UAE, it's pretty hot, even at night. Although if you're in the middle of Saudi, it may not be that hot because you're well inland. But if you're anywhere close to the coast, oh, it's pretty damn hot in the Gulf. In Northeast Africa, I don't know what it's like there in Cairo at this time. You're relatively close to the coast. I don't know how hot it would be at night. Okay, 23 degrees Celsius at midnight. That's not that hot. That's actually a pretty nice temperature, to be fair. As long as the humidity's not that high, 23 degrees is okay. 23 degrees at night is a nice temperature, as long as it's not too humid. %50 humidity. Okay, that's not that bad. 50% humidity is okay. Because anyone that's lived in the Gulf, oh my God, in the summertime, the humidity is like way over 100%. I didn't quite understand how that works. When I was living in the Middle East, they were like, humidity today is 130%. I was like, what? How can it be over 100? How does that work? I don't know. I don't understand how humidity is measured, but they'll be like, yo, humidity is 120% tonight. I have never in my life, and I've been many countries around the world, I've never ever been anywhere that was as hot as the Gulf. When I say the Gulf, I'm talking about the Arabian Gulf, or some people call it the Persian Gulf. By the coast in places like Dubai, Qatar, Bahrain. These places in the summer are insanely hot. I mean, insane. literally encircled. The air is so thick, you feel like you can swim through the air. That's how high the humidity is. It's crazy. I've never been anywhere in my life before or since that had that level of humidity. It was crazy. Literally encircled. It's like that. I remember coming out the airport. I think it was in Qatar during the summer. And you know, the air conditioning in those Gulf states is like turbocharged. So when you're inside the airport, it's like freezing cold. And then those electric doors open and you go out into the car park and you're hit by a flipping wall of heat and humidity. It's literally like a wall as soon as you go out of the electric doors. And yeah, I was drenched in sweat in seconds. It was that humid and hot. Crazy. Telstar says, India was the hottest I've felt, but not been to the Gulf yet. I heard Saudi can get to the mid 40s in summer. It can get up into the 50s. Yeah, in the Gulf, it can get up into the low 50s. Celsius, yes, in the low 50s Celsius. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. Now, I spoke to somebody when I was living in the Middle East who had visited India, and they were told that India was really hot. India is obviously a big country, and the heat is going to vary depending on which part of India you're in. But they said that India was nowhere near as hot as the Gulf. Make it out I don't know what part of India they visited. I don't remember what they said. But they were like, nah, man, India's not like here. Here is a different kind of heat. It's crazy. What will be says, I don't know how them F1 drivers drive the cars in them hot places for nearly 2 hours with no brakes. Well, presumably they do it in the wintertime. I'm guessing the Grand Prix out there in the Middle East are in the winter, because the winter is relatively mild. In the Gulf, it'll be like high teens, low 20s in the daytime. It might get as cold as 15, 16 degrees Celsius. So if it's in the winter, it's okay. But as soon as it hits the summer months, forget about it, bro. Like, it gets so hot in the Gulf in summer that the government will regularly issue warnings about the heat, telling don't go outside during these hours, it's too hot. Like, people can actually have, heart attacks or, collapse from dehydration or whatever. Heat stroke is a big thing. It's dangerous to go outside during the sun. And if you do go outside, make sure your head's covered. They literally send out government warnings all the time during the summer because it's that hot. And of course, me, like a lunatic, I would ignore all those warnings and go out without a hat in close to 50 degrees Celsius heat in the middle of summer for hours on end, walking in the desert, fishing and stuff like that. And I'm sure I did get heat stroke a few times. But I was like, I'm a tough guy. I can deal with heat stroke. The way heat stroke felt is, I got a bald head and I wasn't putting hats on and everything. And you just get a headache. So after getting heat stroke a few times, I'll come back to the house and I'd have bloodshot eyes and a pounding headache. People can die of heat stroke, you know what I mean? But I never did, obviously. I was never hospitalized or anything with it. But not everybody is me. And obviously, as a melanated person, my body is more equipped to deal with extreme temperatures than somebody that's not melanated or whatever the case may be. But it was still intense even for me. So the Bahrain Grand Prix, for example, that's one of the Middle Eastern Grand Prix, takes place in April. April is not that hot there. April, I want to say, is probably in the 20s. So for that Grand Prix, it's not that hot in April. Saudi Grand Prix, when does that take place? Yeah, Saudi Grand Prix also normally takes place in April. So this is before it really gets crazy hot. Oh, excuse me, Mr. Super Chat. Let me get that. Oh, excuse me, Double A, thank you for the Super Chat. He says, why was Roy Jones Jr.'s chin weak post-prime? He barely got hit. Well, it's possible that his chin was always weak, because in his prime, he never got hit. So it's possible he always had a weak chin, but because of the skills, well, I say skills, the athleticism, nobody ever managed to check his chin. So that's one possibility. Another possibility is it was because of the weight cut after he came down from heavyweight. Another possibility still is it's a combination of several factors. Because when he came back down from heavyweight, it was the first Tava fight where he struggled a little bit. And then in the rematch, he got hit with a big shot, chinned. And maybe it was a case of his chin got cracked for good. Sometimes that happens with fighters. When they've been knocked out once, some guys, their chin is never the same again after that. So it could have been a combination of things. But big up Double A for the Super Chat. Here's the thing, right? Having traveled around, for whatever reason, I don't really know what's going on from a scientific perspective, but 40 degrees in the UK doesn't feel anywhere near as hot as 40 degrees in other countries. It just doesn't. Nor does 30 degrees. So in Costa Rica, 30 degrees feels incredibly hot when the sun is directly on your skin. Incredibly hot in Costa Rica. 30 degrees in much of the Caribbean, like in Barbados, also feels pretty damn hot when the sun's on your skin. 30 degrees in the UK doesn't feel that hot. It feels kind of humid, but the sun never really feels intense on your skin in Britain when it's 30 degrees. It never does. I now live in Southern Africa, and 30 degrees here is not that much different than the UK. It doesn't feel that intense here for whatever reason. I don't know what's going on with regards to the sun and the distance from the earth and the angle. I don't know what it is, whether it's something to do with the atmosphere. But here where I live in Southern Africa, in the middle of summer, their summer is the Northern Hemisphere's winter. So summer here is like September, October, November, December. Well, September, October, November, that's around summer here. And it gets up to the low 30s and it doesn't feel that hot. It's hot, but it's nothing crazy compared to what I've experienced in other countries. In Costa Rica, it's about 30 degrees Celsius year round. And for example, in Barbados, which is the last Caribbean country I visited, it's also about 30 degrees year round. But in the summer, I'm telling you, the heat in Barbados is way more intense than here, even though on the thermometer, it's the same temperature. But how it feels is just way different. Way, way different. It's not even close. Barbados feels way hotter than here. Costa Rica, even in terms of the countries which are 30 degree temperature, there or thereabouts, Costa Rica is the hottest place. And I'm not talking about the humidity. I'm talking about the intensity of the sun on your skin. Maybe it's to do with UV rays and God knows what else. But the Costa Rican sun feels way hotter at 30 degrees than it does in any other place I've visited at that particular temperature. It's not on the level of the Middle East, because there it's like 40 degrees and up, and that is just a type of 40 degrees which is far beyond your imagination. The UK 40 degrees is nothing like it, trust me. It's nothing like it. It's like some baby thing in the UK in terms of their 40-degree heat compared to the Middle East at 40 degrees. It's just a totally different thing. Big up Matt Borgerson for the super chat. He says, is Atama Usyk's George Foreman? If he wins as emphatically defeating Caballel and Atama by taking them deep, pause, would he be in the top 3 heavyweights of all time? It depends on what Atama does and maybe even what Caballel does after those potential defeats. If they go on to become great fighters in their own right, then yeah. Maybe Usyk does get definitively put in the top 3 heavyweights of all time. It's like when Floyd Mayweather beat Canelo. Okay, he drained Canelo and he beat a green Canelo, but the success that Canelo had after that fight helped to bolster Mayweather's resume. It's like the gift that keeps on giving. So it really depends on, if Usyk was to defeat Itama and Caballel, how successful they were after those defeats would determine where Usyk would stand in terms of all-time greats. Telstar says, UK is fairly windy, so I reckon that's why, but Central Line is torture. I don't think it's got anything to do with the wind. Because Barbados is pretty windy. I don't think it's got anything to do with it. I think it's more to do with UV. If I had to guess, I would say it's more to do with UV or something. Because the sun just feels way more intense in somewhere like Barbados or Costa Rica at 30 degrees than it ever does in the UK. I think it's probably something to do with UV or something like that. They got Matt Borgerson for the super chat. Encircled says, why are there these people trying to act like Rico is some massive star? Well, he might be on the continent. I don't know. Because on the European continent, on the mainland, in some countries, kickboxing is really big, like in Holland, in France to some extent, and some other countries. Maybe he's a big star there. But in the Anglosphere, he's not even remotely close to being a big star. And we've had this back and forth with some people that have turned up in previous live chats or live streams in the live chat. And they've tried to argue that Rico's a big star even in the UK. I mean, these are clearly people who live in this kickboxing bubble. And they don't realize that they live in a bubble. Because trust me, most people in the UK before this Usyk fight was made had no idea that this Rico even existed. As was evidenced by all the people at the time when I was doing that live stream that was saying the same thing as me. Dozens or hundreds of boxing fans saying the same thing. Never heard of the guy before the Usyk fight was made. Whereas with Francis Ngannou, most boxing fans knew about him and had heard of him. Because UFC is a big brand in the Anglosphere. So even if they weren't UFC fans, people had heard of Francis Ngannou. But in the Anglosphere, Rico's never been anything like a big star. Anyone saying that he is, they're just delusional. No, it's not about the time of day, what will be, because I've been out in the blazing sun at all times of day, morning, noon, afternoon, all times of day, in the blazing sun in Costa Rica and in the blazing sun in the UK, many, many times over many, many years. And I'm just telling you that the temperature, the heat is nowhere near as intense in Britain. Not even close. I mean, my girlfriend at the time, when I first went to Costa Rica, she's African, right? Zimbabwean. And the first week in Costa Rica, she suffered the worst sunburn I have ever seen a black person suffer in my entire life. I didn't even know black people could get sunburn like that. But she got terrible, horrendous sunburn. She had like massive, welts and blisters all over her arms and back and stuff like that. I was like, whoa. And this is an African that was born in Africa and raised in Africa until she was a teenager. And the sun in Costa Rica was so intense that she was like breaking out in all these blisters all over her arms, back, everything. It was wild. That never happened to her in Britain. I mean, it was crazy. Big up D-Man for the super chat. He says, big up Hatman. What is the most overrated cuisine in your opinion? I'd say Italian. Overrated cuisine. I do want to preface what I'm about to say. Overrated doesn't mean bad. It just means not as good as popular opinion would have you believe. So I would say Jamaican cuisine is one of the most overrated for me. It's nice, but it's nothing amazing, bro. Like, Jamaicans get way too carried away with their, it's amazing Jamaican food. Like, it's all right. It's decent, but it's not that amazing, bro. Like, calm down. Calm down. It's not that spectacular. Someone says Indian food gets a lot of hype. I think Indian food deserves the hype. One, because there is such an incredible variety of Indian food. Incredible variety. What I would say is the Indian food in the UK has kind of gone downhill because so many of these Indian restaurateurs, and many of them aren't actually Indian, by the way, they're Bengalis. They're very unscrupulous and they don't keep up a high standard of food, and they're, just looking at profit margins and not giving you bang for your buck and all that kind of business. But Indian food done right, like the old school Indian restaurants in Britain, and maybe if you actually went to India itself, Indian food when it's done right is phenomenal. For me anyway, because again, there's just so much variety. Jamaica's obviously a small country. There's not much variety in their cuisine. India's got vast different types of cuisine all throughout the country from different regions. And okay, the street food is wild. We've all seen the Indian street food, wild. Yeah, we know that. So we stay away from the street food. But restaurant food, when done right, Indian food is spectacular. The food is so fragrant, the different types of flavors and the colors and the taste. It's just, yeah. No, I love Indian food. Big up Arco for the super chat. It says, Hatman, how did you sort out the Starlink VPN issues for your streams? Well, I was living somewhere that had a much better Starlink connection for whatever reason. I don't live there now. I've moved into a different place, which also has Starlink, but the Starlink here, for whatever reason, isn't quite as good. But YouTube no longer flags me for being outside of the UK. So I actually don't stream with a VPN most of the time now. I can stream with a VPN, but it slows the connection speed down. So most of the time I don't stream with a VPN, and I don't get flagged by YouTube anymore. Because before, when I first arrived there, and this didn't happen in Costa Rica for some reason, but in this country, when I'd try and stream without the VPN switched on, well, with the VPN switched on, the connection was terrible. Whereas in Costa Rica, I'd stream with a VPN and it was fine. But here, when I switch the VPN off, I'll get a message on the screen from YouTube saying unusual activity detected or whatever, you know, please complete these verification steps and all this silly carry on. So I get all that going on. But after being here for a few months and then turning the VPN off, all of that stopped. So maybe the YouTube algorithm has got used to me not being in the UK and it's letting me live now, streaming from a different location. So, yeah, that's what it was. Big up Arco for the super chat. I'll be back says, can't beat good Chinese. You know, not to be derogatory, but Chinese food is like fast food. I never sit down and have a Chinese meal and feel like I've actually eaten real food. Does that make sense? It's like fast food. It's not, you know, doesn't feel like a real hearty, nutritious meal when you're eating Chinese food. Whereas if you eat Jamaican food, you actually feel like you've eaten a real meal. Same with Indian food, but with Chinese food, it's like, this is just, yeah, some form of fast food. But I've long said that in the UK, the best value for money food in terms of takeaways is Turkish. When I was still living in the UK, I was all about the Turkish grill. Lucan says Chinese food is better than Indian food. I strongly disagree with that. But hey, it's subjective, innit? Everyone's got a different palate. But for me, Indian food is way better than Chinese food. It's not even in the same universe. Maybe you haven't had proper Indian food because, again, there are so many unscrupulous establishments these days, Indian establishments. The quality of Indian food in the UK has definitely gone very downhill over the past 20 years or so. Very, very downhill. It's hard to find good Indian places in the UK now. But when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, there was loads of good Indian restaurants that made just fantastic food. Jupiter String says, you need to go to central London for good Chinese food. What, in Chinatown? Maybe it's changed now, but Chinese food in Chinatown was like the worst back in the days. That's like the worst Chinese food. The best Chinese food that I found in London was in rich areas like Richmond. There was a Chinese place next to, is it Q Underground Station? I think it might be Q. But there was a Chinese place next to there that was pretty damn good. So in rich parts of London, if you go to a Chinese restaurant there, you might find a hidden gem. But in Chinatown, I mean, there are so many different restaurants in Chinatown. Maybe you can find good Chinese food there, but you have to go through quite a few bad places to find a good one. Because a lot of them buffet places in Chinatown are just trash. Food's not good at all. Big up D-Man for the super chat. He says, what do you think of Putin and Orange Man going to visit Xi? I think it signaled a shift in power from east to west. I agree. And I think that power shift has been coming. I think that power shift has been decades in the making. Behind the scenes. Decades in the making. I think now they're just acknowledging it, or starting to acknowledge it publicly, starting to give us the clues of what's been going on behind the scenes all along. Yeah, I do like Chinese rice, special fried rice. I like Chinese food. Don't get it twisted. I like it, but it just feels like fast food. You know, it doesn't feel like you're being nourished when you eat it. There's something temporary and throwaway about it. You know, when you're eating like sweet and sour chicken balls and stuff like this. Just pause. Sweet and sour chicken chow mein, or, you know, it just, you don't feel nourished eating that stuff. It's full of all sorts of bad stuff as well. I agree, Omar. Very, very weird indeed. Very, very weird. The eyes, Chico, they never lie. Look at the eyes on that woman, bro. Her eyes are just, nah. Alarm bells, ding, 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 ding. When you look at her eyes, it's like, nah. That is a sinister individual, in my opinion. Very sinister. Well, most parts of the world are facing population decline. As far as China's potential population collapse, because their population is already so enormous, over 1 billion people, and the fact that they are very, very technologically advanced and advancing even more very rapidly, they're not going to need as many people because of the level of technology. So any collapse in their population won't be as bad as a collapse in the West, because their population is so massive to start with, and for two, they have crazy technology. The only region of the world which is in population increase rather than decline, as far as I'm aware, is Africa. Africa is on a very steep upward trajectory in terms of population increase. Yes, Africa. The population in Africa is increasing more than any other region in the world. Most other regions, it's either stagnant or it's in decline. Whereas in Africa, it's increasing rapidly. Yeah, Chinese technology is pretty crazy. it's, it's pretty crazy. I mean, so many Chinese companies now are at the forefront of particular types of technology. So with drones, at least for the consumer market, you got companies like DJI that are at the forefront of the drone market. And even when it comes to vlogging cameras, DJI are also very, very much up there. The two biggest like consumer grade camera companies right now, like for vlogging, would be DJI and Insta360. I'm not sure where Insta360 is from, like where that company is based. Is it Japanese or is it a Western company? I don't know, but DJI is Chinese. And I think it's part Chinese government owned, DJI. And they are putting out products to compete with Western products that in many cases are superior. So for example, there's a Chinese version of a Tesla, and I've spoken to people that have owned Teslas and that they've owned this Chinese version. Can somebody tell me the Chinese equivalent of the Tesla? What's the name of the brand? I forget the name of it now. But I've literally spoken to people that have owned both, and they've said the Chinese version is vastly superior to a Tesla. Like way better, not even close. China was down bad for a while there. When I was growing up, China was always a poor country. BYD, thank you, BYD. Yeah, people, I have known people that have owned Tesla and BYD, and they say BYD is way better than Tesla. Like just way better. When I was growing up, China was still kind of poor. They have advanced so rapidly, it's quite impressive, isn't it? Oh, is that what it stands for? Build your dreams. I didn't realize that. Big up D-Man for the super chat. It says, people are always shocked when I say the best Indian food I've had was in Tanzania. Okay, and the car's a BYD. I'm not sure why they're shocked, because there's a lot of Indians in Tanzania. On the Swahili coast, there's been Indians there for centuries. So I'm not sure why they're shocked by that. I haven't yet visited Tanzania, but I've been told by so many people that Tanzanian food is amongst the best in the world. Telstar says, so in China, the taxis are BYD. All my days when I say those cars are comfy, I was ordering 7-seater taxis for the cost of £10. But I don't want anyone to get it confused when I'm acknowledging China's achievements. I don't want to live in China. I don't want to have a social credit score or any of that stuff. For me, there's more to life and more to what I want than just amazing technology. Technology is cool, but at some point it can get to the point where it's not particularly necessary for me personally. So as impressive as it is, and some people love it in China, and that's good for them. But for me personally, I don't need crazy technology in order to feel like I'm living my best life. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, the style of governance that they have there is not for me. I don't like the whole social credit score and CCP and all that. It's not for me. But evidently, with their particular style of governance, they've been very successful on the global stage, raising China up to become, well, a superpower now, I guess. Have I played God of War? Yes. Played God of War, every God of War since God of War. No, I played God of War 3, God of War Ascension. Then I played God of War 2018. Those are the God of Wars I played. I played a little bit of God of War 2, but I think I played it on PS4. So long after it came out on a previous console. So I never really got into it because the graphics were so dated. But my favorite God of War of the ones I played was always God of War 3. In Circle says, I can't believe one of my friends actually thinks Musk and Orange Man will save the US. Yeah, I've seen people like that, and they're just completely delusional. They're totally delusional. There's no stopping what's coming. There's a power shift in the world right now, and there's nothing that can be done to stop it. There's nothing that can be done. It's going to happen. And the reason I say there's nothing that can be done to stop it is because we now live in the nuclear age, where all these major countries have got nukes. So if you attempted to stop what's going on, it would result in a nuclear holocaust, and that doesn't benefit anybody. So clearly, in my opinion, there's silent agreements behind the scenes, decades before now, an understanding that yes, power is going to shift over to these countries now, and things are going to change. And there's Orange Man is not there to stop that from happening. He is there to placate the American public to some extent, so they don't get upset about what's happening. But there's no stopping it. And that's just the way things go. Civilizations rise and fall. There's no civilization that's ever existed that stayed on top forever. Do you know what I mean? They rise and fall. Thousands of years ago, Iraq was one of, if not the most powerful civilization in the world when it was Mesopotamia, Babylon, and all that. Is Iraq a major player in the world today? Hell no. It's pretty much a third world country now. But once upon a time, Iraq was like extremely powerful and rich, and they had incredible technology for their time. All that's long gone. So, civilizations rise and fall. That's just the natural aspect of human existence. What goes up must come down. Shout out to Double A for the super chat. He says, did you have any regrets about not going pro? I still have regrets when I see people I sparred and fought fighting in world or British level. I don't have any regrets because I did whatever I could, and ultimately I wasn't able to turn pro because of a series of injuries that I suffered. And I also had short-sightedness, which would have precluded me from getting a professional license in the UK. My eyes were good enough for amateur boxing, but were not good enough for professional boxing. I would have needed laser eye surgery, but laser eye surgery is not permitted, believe it or not, in order to obtain a license in the UK. And I had other chronic injuries that I was battling with, and it just didn't come to fruition. My amateur career didn't go the way I wanted it to because of the injuries and because of the fact I had to work full time, and It just wasn't meant to be. It wasn't a life path which was open and available to me or for me to pursue. And it was very frustrating because I was very talented, but I tried my best and just wasn't meant to be. So I don't regret anything. You know, you can only regret if you don't try your best and if you don't take the opportunities. I tried my best and I took the opportunities, but it just wasn't meant to be. There were too many roadblocks and I didn't have whatever was necessary to overcome those roadblocks. So it was what it was. It's not like I was someone that wasn't dedicated or someone that wasn't focused or nah. It was just like injuries and I was having to work and I couldn't sleep and my performances were all over the place because I was working 10-hour days, sometimes 11-hour days, and then trying to box after that. And I just couldn't handle it. On top of that injury, it just didn't work. In order for me to have had a successful professional boxing career, you know, turned pro and been successful, I would have needed some kind of mentor as an amateur. Sponsors even, that subsidized me so I didn't need to try and work, so I could just concentrate on my amateur career. If I'd had something like that, then I would have been far more successful. But I didn't have anything like that, so it was what it was. I did what I could. Big up D-Man, he says, opinions on the Odyssey casting. Also, to be fair, China is kind of reclaiming its throne. People forget that. Also, God, how do you pronounce that? Is it Thucydides? Trap was an interesting thing I learned about. I've never heard of that. Odyssey casting, I've not seen the Odyssey casting. So I couldn't comment on that. Maybe you can enlighten me. Big up Arco for the super chat. It says, Hatman, you mentioned that in your opinion, Conor Benn not revealing why he was cleared could only mean it was a technicality, but maybe Conor just shifted them some money and got them to sign an NDA. Look, anything is possible, but that would be, you know, a pretty scandalous instance of serious fraud. If Conor Benn just was guilty but paid him some money and then they lifted the ban over that. Either way, it's bad, right? I'm going to assume it wasn't something that crazy and it was just a technicality, and that's why Conor Benn doesn't want to go public about it. Do I train every day? At the moment, yes, I do. I try and do exercise every day. Go running, push-ups, shadow boxing, so on and so forth. Eggsy says, is that the thing where the declining superpower picks a fight with a rising one? Okay, is that the word he used there? Is it Thucydides? God, I don't know how to pronounce that. It sounds like some crazy Greek word. Kylie says, Matt Damon is in the Odyssey. Okay. Matt Damon's all right. I don't mind him as an actor. He's not one of my favorites, but he's all right. I want to say a high point for him was the Bourne movies. D-Man says, yes, correct. When one power is rising and the existing power feels threatened, it often leads to conflict. But that's in the pre-nuclear age. In the nuclear age that we now live in, it's a totally different ballgame, isn't it? That's why you don't see these big powers fighting each other head on anymore. You see proxy wars and other methods of conflict rather than hot wars. You see cold wars, proxy wars, and all this kind of stuff rather than head-on conflict, because a nuclear war, where when both sides have those type of weapons, it doesn't benefit anybody. No one wants that kind of smoke. So those weapons are there for a deterrent, really. And so now it's like non-linear warfare and proxy wars and cold wars and all sorts of other stuff. Well, I've seen one guy that always does Partridge impression, and also AJ and other people. His Partridge impression is the best one, but even that one is a bit weird because he's stuck in one particular mode that Partridge talks in. He doesn't go into the other modes because Partridge doesn't talk the same way. By Partridge, I'm talking about Tyson Fury here, folks. He doesn't talk the same way all the time. He has different kind of tones and different ways of communicating and different body language. But that guy that does the Partridge impressions, he always has this kind of wide-eyed, bewildered looking expression on his face when he's doing the Partridge impression. And his voice is quite good, but he's just stuck in one particular version of Tyson Fury. And that's a little annoying. I'd like to see him expand his Furyisms a bit further to give a more realistic, take on Fury. His AJ, not that great, I don't think. It's okay, but his Fury's much better. Shout out to that guy. He says, good shiz. At least you gave it 100%. Big up that guy. Yeah, tried my best. All you can do is try your best, right? See, if you try your best and fail, you can't be mad at yourself. You might be mad at the world. You might be mad at the world, but at least you can't be mad at yourself. Because you tried your best. What else can you do? Or you might be mad at your parents. I don't know. You might be mad at someone, but if you try your best and fail, you can't be mad at yourself. Well, I guess you could be. You could be mad at yourself that you're not better than you actually are, but that's kind of a slippery slope, isn't it? You have to accept whatever you are, whatever ability you have. If you've maxed it out, it is what it is. You can't do any more. That guy says his AJ kind of sucks, to be honest. Yeah, his AJ's a bit, it's a little bit like AJ, but it's not really. He's studied Fury a lot more closely than he studied AJ, it would seem anyway, because his Fury impression is a lot better than the AJ impression. Big up Kylie, he says, the Bourne movies were brilliant. It forced James Bond to step up its game. That's a whole fact. I should have a sound effect on here. An explosion or something when someone says something profound. That's a whole fact. Yes. After the Bourne movies came out, James Bond had to switch it up. James Bond then had to start basically copying Bourne. Yeah. Bourne changed the game when it came to, spy thrillers or whatever. Yeah, Jason Bourne changed the game. The Bourne identity, should I say, changed the game. Bond had to be reimagined after that as more gritty and what have you. Encircled says, to be honest, AJ is so vanilla. that he is hard to impersonate. I think the easiest one of the Furies to impersonate is John Fury. Big bad John Fury, 100 road. Ah. Big fighting man, John Fury. Do you remember when Tyson Fury won the world title? At a post-fight press conference, John Fury started shouting and screaming, and he was like, what did he say? Piers Brosnan's been on the phone. I guess he meant to say Piers Morgan, but he said, Piers Brosnan's been on the phone. That's why I even said the Queen's going to be on the phone. Piers Brosnan. Why would Piers Brosnan be on the phone? Yeah, John was fresh out of jail then. He came out of jail not long before the Klitschko fight. It might have been the fight before the Klitschko fight. It might have been around the time when he fought Chisora for the second time. Was that the fight before the Klitschko fight, the Chisora fight? It might have been around then when he came out of prison. And he started doing those interviews with Coogan. Convincing everyone he was the toughest man in the world. Big bad John Fury, 100 on the hard road, pop, pop, bang, end of bum. When Mickey Theo challenged him, I'll die in a fight. Remember when he started screaming and shouting, I'll die in a fight. I'm as game as an American Yankee cock. And what? Pause. That's what man said. Man said that he's as game as an American Yankee cock. Pause. Is Broner still fighting? I certainly hope not. Have you seen him recently? He's a mess. Down bad. Oh, it was Christian Hammer, was it? The fight before Klitschko. Yeah, that makes sense because that's when... Was it Christian Hammer? He certainly popped for the Christian Hammer fight, but he popped long after the fight. He popped after the Klitschko fight, but it wasn't for the Klitschko fight. It was for the Hammer fight. D-Man says he's such a drunkard, it's sad. Well, he claims he doesn't drink. But he's such a pathological liar, who knows whether that's true. Some people have suggested that he's actually on the nose candy. It would kind of make sense, to be honest, if he is. I wouldn't be surprised if that, I don't know that it's true, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is true. He certainly said that he used to take a lot of substances back in the days. If he's still taking them, like nose candy, I wouldn't at all be surprised. before he goes to these press conferences, he might be like Tony Montana. You know what I mean? Hoovering it up. When he goes to the press conference full of beans, ready to fight the world. So people have asked me whether I think it's sad what's happened to Adrian Broner. Not at all. Adrian Broner is fulfilling his destiny. He's been on that road for years and years and years. Even when he was still fighting, he was on that road. That's the path he chose. That's the life he chose. What am I going to feel sorry for him for? He chose to go down that path. So he's fulfilling his destiny. That's what he was born to be. A crash out. So let him do his thing. Let him do his thing. He's born to be a clown and a crash out. That's just what it is. Salute Ocean Blue. Big up, big up. Mystified says, path he chose like Gaza and George Best. Well, with George Best, I would say, yeah, it's the path he chose. With Gaza, I get more the feeling that he was a really troubled soul. Very troubled. I don't get the feeling that Adrian Broner is that troubled, to be honest. I think he's just an idiot. And an idiot who enjoys being an idiot. So, I've never got the impression he's really troubled. I just think the man's an idiot. He's like a class clown type character by nature who's had the ability to make millions of dollars. So that's what happens when a class clown continues being a class clown. And he's got millions of dollars to spend on whatever nonsense he wants. Yeah, it's crazy how young Broner is, isn't it? We forget when he was champion, when he was at super featherweight and lightweight and all that. He was very, very young then. So yeah, he's one of these guys who has been around forever, but he's still not that old. All right, peeps, I'm going to shut this one down. Prepare for landing. I hope you've had a enjoyable trip. Enjoyable flight on Hatman Airways. I wish you a safe onward journey. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for flying with us. And a special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. They were Green Entity, JM, James Clifford, Adam Fawkes, Galaxy Edits, Luca, GMS Nightmare, Charles B, Gaz, Supersize Fries, Double A, Matt Borgerson, D-Man, Arco, and that guy 1067. So, until next time, you guys take care out there. Be good. I'll catch you on the other side. I'm out.